We'll go ahead and start her up. Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Brad Glasgow, a journalist who covered GamerGate and who everyone says I need to talk to. How are you doing today, Brad?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, hey, Brad. So you wrote about GamerGate at the time. You covered it as a
hmm
journalist. You also were generally considered to be, I think, one of the better people to have covered GamerGate.
I think so. uh, People kind of consider me to have covered it more fairly than most.
Yeah, I definitely got that impression at the time. So you had a unique approach. Well, you did a couple different things. First off,
Yes.
you actually talked to GamerGate people, which is kind of a step in the right direction, something we didn't see a whole lot of. You even
Yeah.
didn't ask me anything on Reddit to try and better understand what was going on Kotaku in action.
Yeah. But originally, what they said was that journalists can't really cover Gamergate because you can't ask Gamergate any questions because Gamergate is this big amorphous blob of just a mass of people that is just a total mess. And so my first foray into it was I got on to the Reddit, the subreddit, Kotaku in Action. And I said, okay, guys, I'm going to ask you some questions. And what you do, how you answer it is you look through the answers and you select whichever one is you feel represents you the best, and this will be your answer. And so I asked them a bunch of questions, and over some time, so I was able to ask a couple of follow up questions here and there, and people would vote on what they felt was the best answer. And of course, a whole lot of people gave their own answer. Uh, and yeah, we I published that on GamePolitics.com when that was a website. So I, I felt that kind of proved that you kind of could talk to Gamergate.
And then you later developed a fairly robust system for how to interact with online movements. I think it's safe to say you had an online, so GamerGate obviously online movement, no leaders. Um, what you did though was, and correct me if I get some of the details wrong, but basically you created a massive battery of questions, and then what you did was you took people from all over from various GamerGate communities, and you asked them to apply to be a participant in this survey. And when you got, I think it was what, over 1,000 people, it was some extremely high number of people. It might have been 900 something. I don't know.
Um, God, what was it? I don't even remember. It was like 800, I think,
It might have been, yeah. And
or
then
700.
what you did was that you had requirements. So they had to prove that they were, you had to verify each person was actually a real Gamergate supporter and not just a troll or someone who's voting twice. So what you did was
Yeah,
you made them send in proof that they had supported Gamergate for at least what, a couple months at that prior. So it couldn't be like a
yes,
brand new account who's just come in and be like, "Oh yeah, I support GamerGate," and I have no post history at all about this, but or no tweets, anything. So you accepted a wide array of different types of evidence to prove that someone had supported the movement in the past, and then you let them take the survey, which I think was a pretty good approach, about as good as you're going to get with something like this, maybe.
yeah. That's kind of what I figured. It's about the best way. It's not certainly not a perfect way because in order in order to qualify to take the survey, you had to prove that either on Reddit or on Twitter or well anywhere else that you could prove it that you supported Gamergate, and then that's actually not that difficult to do when you on Twitter. Of course, you have the hashtag Gamergate, so and you had a lot of people who would do that mass retweeting where it said I support Gamergate, hashtag Gamergate, I support ethics in journalism, I support no harassment and stuff. A lot of people reposted that. So if you post that, then yeah, you're probably a Gamergate supporter. Um, So that was easy. And also on Reddit, on that Kotaku in Action subreddit, or at that time, I think there was also the Kotaku in Action 2 with
No,
a
that
split
came
off.
later. That came later. But I
Oh,
think you
was it?
did
Okay.
talk with GG Discussion or against GamerGate, those subreddits, right?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So if you, if you, at that time, well, still today, if you post in Kotaku in Action, a lot of other subreddits will automatically ban you from their subreddit for just for posting anything in Kotaku in Action. So the very act of posting in Kotaku in Action is almost enough just by itself to show that you support Gamergate. But if you're in there arguing any of the points that uh, of Gamergate, then we can pretty safely say that you're a Gamergate supporter. And what we couldn't get, unfortunately, were the 4chan people or the 8chan at that time, because we can't verify that this person is this account on 8chan or.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we missed those people. But at that time, the 8chan, it wasn't all that active, especially compared with Kotaku in Action, which had its numbers were pretty staggering for the number of people it was pulling. And 8chan was relatively not as active, so we missed them. But as you said, I think that's about the best we could do. So we know that it was 725 people in the survey. And
Okay.
so I know each of those 725 people, I'm confident they are Gamergate supporters, and there's no false flagging. There's no people just, uh, jumping in there willy nilly or anything. So,
Yeah. And I was
uh,
one of those people.
good. Yeah.
All right. So, what made you want to cover Gamergate?
The challenge. Well, also I was like a local newspaper reporter, and I was getting out of that. And of course, I've been a gamer all my life, and GamerGate was just fascinating to me. And I was also, before I was the newspaper reporter, I was a survey researcher down in the Detroit area, mostly with automotive research. And so I said, you know what? We got a whole mass of people that you have a problem in journalism of how to talk to GamerGate, and you know you you got a whole mass of anonymous people, and my one job used to be talking to people anonymously for surveys. So let's combine the two of journalism and surveying, and see if what kind of results we get. And I think it was mostly successful.
Yeah, I think the data more or less lines up with what my views are on what Gamergate was. I don't
Hmm.
think there's like any question where it's like, holy cow, this was answered way differently than I expected. I think it was all
Yeah.
pretty much what I expected. Now, you didn't release the full data set though, correct?
Yes, I have.
Oh, you have. On the website,
uh,
I only
on request.
saw the politics portion of it. Well, mostly the politics portion of it, I think.
Hmm.
But that was on
Uh,
Game Politics, the article maybe. That wasn't the.
yeah, well, it took a while before I released the data because I was kind of holding on to it for a bit. But then whenever anyone requested it, I went ahead and said, "Here's the data." I started doing that like a few years ago, I think.
And you also talked about writing a book about Gamergate. How's that going?
Yeah, that's not going so great. I really wanted to write a book, but the real problem I had with that is Steve Bannon. So if you if you're going to consider Gamergate as a whole, you have people that have their personal views on it, which is great. People who are inside Gamergate who supported it, and so you get their opinion, which is great. But on a national level, or well, international level, because it was an international movement, uh, you you have several uh, articles in the New York Times and Washington Post, and they all point to Steve Bannon. saying that it's something that he orchestrated. It's something he developed an army. He was developing an army of online people to support Trump, and uh, yeah, this was he had his whole World of Warcraft money thing going on, and so people who don't really understand the situation, of which there are very very many people
Yes.
who do that. So they believe that narrative that this is Steve Bannon creating an army of of online soldiers who create memes for Donald Trump, and that's basically what GamerGate is. And of course, GamerGate predated Donald Trump by several years.
Yeah.
Uh, but to really get the gist of what GamerGate is, Steve Bannon also said in an interview that if you can get these people, if you can harness their power, and he's kind of acting like an evil genius that and personally, I don't believe he really had any idea what Gamergate was either. So, but I really need to talk to Steve Bannon in order to really have what I would think is the definitive book on Gamergate.
Oh. Well, I've already written one book on Gamergate, and I did not talk to Steve Bannon, and I don't really plan on talking to him now. Well,
Yeah.
he wasn't even involved. I think he talked about it years later, maybe, and said like these people they could have been great allies or something.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and well, of course he was
Milo's boss.
Breitbart's.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
Milo's boss.
yeah,
But I don't. Yeah, I'm with you there. I've heard the argument before that like, oh well, Gamergate weren't those the people that were conned by Steve Bannon? It's like, no, not really.
yeah, yeah.
Because their argument, I guess, would be, um, but Gamergate was blowing up into this massive thing, and Breitbart
Hmm.
was one of the few outlets that was willing to cover it, and so they sent
Yep.
Milo in to cover the movement in a more positive light than what much of the media was saying at the time. And Milo became a little bit of a minor internet celebrity, and then he flamed
Hmm.
out really hard.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But
he
like that
became
seems like that's more or less the story. Like I don't think with Steve Bannon, like I don't think that like he or maybe you disagree that like I don't think that he was like super successful in like turning gamers into a voting bloc for Trump.
Oh no, I don't think he was very successful at it at all. I don't think that was really. I don't even know if that was really his intent. I I'm not entirely sure he has any idea what the hell Gamergate was himself. Um, I think he knew that it was, this anti-social justice kind of a thing, and which is great. And I'm sure he probably saw the numbers on Breitbart that they were getting, and it was probably pretty great. And but I'm not sure he had any idea what the hell is going on there. So uh, because of that, but if I publish a book and I say, well, here's my results. Gamergate is not the right wing movement that people think it is. I've already published a paper about that with my data. Um, people are going to say, oh, no, this is just BS. They either lied on the survey, they misrepresented themselves, or the survey wasn't right, or, they could say a billion different things. Uh, so I felt that uh, I really need to talk to Steve Bannon to really get the gist of it through to people to really make the news.
Well, he's gonna
Uh,
be in
eh,
prison, so that might be hard.
yeah. Well, I've tried to get through to him for a while now, and I've had more. Uh, it was easier to get a hold of a couple billionaires than Steve Bannon, but oh well.
So are you? God.
If I talk to him, that would be a fascinating interview, and I would love to talk to him. And if I manage to do that, then I think you will see some good content from me.
So the book is something you talked about almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people,
Well,
myself included, are like, yeah, it's never going to happen. A lot of people would say that you, like the other people, promised they're going to write a book about this and then never did.
yep. Yep. Well, they're right. They're right. I was going to write a book about it, but as I said, I don't think I have a clean, beginning, middle, and end to it. So to me, it feels incomplete, and I won't be able to do it unless I get a hold of Steve Bannon.
Yeah, well, at least you didn't take any money from people over it or anything.
That's true.
All right, so
That's true.
you don't think that GamerGate was this right wing movement that some people say?
No. There there are right wing people in there. Um,
Yeah, I've interviewed a
but
couple of them, but they're not
yeah,
the
oh yeah,
majority.
no, they're not probably not the majority. I would personally say that GamerGate itself, you could call it. Uh, well, I guess you'd say it's inherently political, but I would say it's mostly an apolitical movement where these were people not really caring much about actual politics, other than they just don't want this, this crap from the game journalists in their games. They don't want the social justice stuff, uh, but it's not necessarily because they totally disagree with social justice. It's more because they don't want uh, politics being pushed on them through video games. So yeah, I in my survey, some of my questions are lifted, or you could say plagiarized, even directly from Pew Research. Pew Research is this very respectful, very highly thought of organization that does research, and they researched uh, the national United States surveys. And so I took some of their questions that they asked, and I asked the exact same question, the exact same wording of Gamergate. So that allowed me to compare the Pew Research people, who they have their survey and they show people being right wing, left wing, whatever, uh, and I could apply that then to Gamergate, and Gamergate was more to the left than the American general public. So, which is kind of expected too, because as I said, Gamergate is international, and there's a pretty big European uh, cohort of Gamergaters. So they are, of course, and I could separate it. I can look at the survey by Americans versus non-Americans, and the non-Americans are more to the left than the Americans. But still, as a whole, it's definitely further to the left than most of the American general public.
So you say
So
that
what can you do?
they don't want politics pushed on them. What do you mean by that?
Well, you always have these games where uh, there's this movement, kind of with Anita Sarkeesian, where they want games to be implements of social change. They want games to promote their own politics. Uh, so, of course, with Anita, she wanted games to be more representative. And, a lot of gamers are like, well, already games are pretty representative. You've always had Lara Croft and other female protagonists, but you know you have this concerted push from the whole Anita Sarkeesian side of things, in the indie game people, and then, but I don't know if you'd say they got control of the media, or what I say is that the gaming media no longer represented the gamers. It represented the left. It represented the Anita Sarkeesian type of people. And you can't or at least at the time, it's very difficult to find any representation in the gaming media of the irreverent, apolitical gamer who just wants to sit there, play games, don't preach to me, don't give me any politics, just let me shoot somebody, you know?
Well,
So, yeah, go
wouldn't
ahead.
wouldn't they argue that like there is no apolitical, there is no you just run around and shoot somebody, that everything you do within the game and everything that is in the game inherently carries with it like certain social connotations or political connotations because it's you interacting with an artistic medium that's trying to send a message or that is sending a message deliberately or not?
Yes, they would argue that everything is political, which my response is that that means that the word political has no meaning. So, I've talked to the makers of Tetris, the maker of Minecraft, uh, maker of Pong. Uh, these people aren't making political games. They'll say it right to your face. There's nothing political about our game. Uh, I think it was Ben Kuchera, who what was he with
It's
Polygon or
Polygon, yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's no longer there, but he famously argued that Tetris, of course, is political because you have this Russian theme music playing to all these Americans during the time of the Cold War. And so I asked them, and they said, "Well, no, it's just a Russian folk song that we like. It's there's nothing political about it. It's catchy. It's a catchy tune." So people say, "Oh, it's political," but well, no, not everything is political. I eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's just a sandwich. It's not a statement on capitalism.
Right. Though a lot of games are a bit more narratively complex than Tetris or Pong or Minecraft even, too.
Yes, absolutely. And some games are absolutely political, and that's okay. But not every game has to be a treatise on colonialism or whatever politics you want to talk about.
All right, so you covered GamerGate. Can you tell me what GamerGate was?
Yes. In my view, Gamergate was an uprising of gamers who got pissed off at the gaming media. That's pretty much it. They were pissed off. You had the whole Zoe Quinn thing, which was I hate using cliches, but kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and gamers grew tired of a media that does not represent them. And still to this day, mostly for the most part, doesn't represent them. In my day back, in the 90s and stuff, we had websites like Old Man Murray, which was very uh, irreverent site, which it would swear, they'd trash talk. It was it was gamers for gamers. And these were the people that, these were the same people that played the games, that wrote about the games. And they, they weren't, they weren't trying to push their politics into their media so much. So uh, about 10 years later, you had a much different media. You had media who was very angry with Blizzard for having elves wearing skimpy clothing. You didn't have any other media that was saying no, you're dumb. This is ridiculous. So when gamers feel that they're not represented in their media, then they speak out, and the media doubled down and went after the gamers for going after them, and it just became an endless loop of people yelling at each other, basically.
Now, an uprising against the games press, that's certainly a way a lot of people in GamerGate see it, but that's not how people who disagree with GamerGate see it. They would say that it was more of a sexist campaign against women.
Yeah. The yeah. Well, I think the uh, most common feeling among non-gamergaters is that these are people who their time is over in gaming, and they're tired, or they were rebelling because games are becoming more representative and they're no longer the dominant group being represented in games, I guess. Gaming is no longer just this white male dominated thing. Uh, but I've not seen any evidence to support that. So, you know, gamers, and especially in Gamergate, they still play pretty much any game, but uh, you're not hearing, even in Gamergate, when you talk to them, you're not hearing much about representation in games. No, you're hearing more about, I'm pissed off that they're telling us that games are not representative, or they're pissed off that they do want to have games where there is a male power fantasy, or there is skimpy clothing, or there is edgy humor.
Well,
Uh,
I don't think we would ever phrase things that way. uh,
no,
what we
probably
would
not,
say is
but
we support the artistic freedom of the developer to make the games that they want to make.
sure, sure. But I've seen the anime games that a lot of gamers want. They
Yeah.
want skimpy
No,
clothing in
I
some
mean
of their
we're
games, and
degenerates.
that's
Don't get us
okay.
wrong, but some
No,
of us
that's
are.
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's perfectly okay. But you see it with what's that game? Volition, Saints Row. With Saints Row, you had uh, first, it was considered a very representative game because your protagonist could be male, female, fat, skinny, black, white, didn't matter. You could be 10 different colors. Uh, and it had edgy humor, and it was pretty fun games. And then, and then they made Saints Row 4, which is considered a more representative game where they made it to appeal to, the a younger, more progressive generation, and it failed so bad that the studio closed. So I think gamers wanted Saints Row 1 through 3 and not 4, or the gamers that were part of GamerGate.
Do you consider yourself a gamer, Brad?
Yes, absolutely.
What does that term mean to you?
Someone who plays video games. Well, someone who plays video games and is someone who plays video games as a hobbyist, you know, somebody who's willing to spend some pretty good money in video games, uh, not just somebody who is on their phone playing some Pokemon Go or something. Well, you that could be a gamer, but somebody who invests in it as a hobby, not just money, but their time, and people who read up on websites about their games. People who consider video games as a hobby, basically.
So you don't view it as a gendered term?
No, or it shouldn't be.
Now, part of what sparked off this whole thing was that on August 28th, 2014, we saw 10 competing websites and then later an additional 9 websites write articles, or 10 articles on one
Mhm.
day and then 9 articles in the following days declaring an end to the gamer identity.
Yep.
Now, why do you think what did you think of those articles?
Gamers are over. um, yeah, that was considered collusion by those who support Gamergate, and
Well, some people
uh,
would say it's collusion, but
that's true, and that's that's a very understandable feeling. A lot of people think, "Oh no, that's just dumb." Well, I don't know how you can blame people when you have was it almost 20 total articles come out in what 24 hours or so?
Well, it was
See,
it was nine and sorry, it was 10 in the first 24 hours, and then there were an additional 9 articles over like the next 4 days.
okay, okay, so but they all said basically the same thing, and so I don't know how you can really blame gamers for saying, "Oh, this is collusion." Uh, at the very least, it looks like collusion, and perspective is everything. So I personally don't think that these writers got together to say, "Oh, hey guys, we got to say, this is the message that we got to all publish on this day and this day. We got to publish opinion articles about this." But I think that these people, these journalists, well, journalists in quotes, uh, they love to copy each other. I saw it with my own articles where I would publish an article, and within a half hour, somebody else would publish an article saying, "Oh, this is what somebody said over on this website." Uh, so I don't personally think it was actually collusion, but I certainly think it was weird, and it shows how similar all the gaming websites are, uh, and they shouldn't be like that. They should be, they should represent a diverse set of beliefs, and they don't. They all represent one belief, and if you don't believe that, your life is difficult as a journalist in gaming media.
So you saw it as anti-pluralistic.
Yes, I believe so. Um, I know firsthand from being in gaming journalism that they do not like people who think differently. they they did not like me. Um, so they definitely are protective of their own, and if you believe differently, they do not want you in gaming media.
How do you think that happened? That they got this? I mean, what do you call it? Like a political groupthink that they, or what is
I think
this?
it's kind of, yeah. I think it's a lot of circling the wagons. These are people who are very low paid, uh, who are not professional, who are just somebody who started writing, and that's basically how they got picked up, uh, and so they all conform for self protection, uh, because if you stick out, you get hammered. So I'm not exactly sure how it started. You'd have to blame the editors of the big publications, of the Kotaku's, Polygons, uh, PC Gamer. Uh, you really have to blame the people that run those websites and the editors who promote their articles.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
sadly, Stephen Totillo has declined to participate in the project.
well, of course, yeah, yeah, yeah. I would expect he would. He has talked about it, Gamergate, a little bit here and there, but I mean, there's not much for him to say. He ran a conformist website, which you know they talked to each other a little bit about actually sending a gift to Zoe Quinn
Yes.
in there. So he, there's there's just not much they can do to defend themselves here.
Well, and
That they can go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead.
Well, they can call GamerGate any kind of a name. They can say GamerGate is harassment, which there was harassment, and they can say is racism or sexism, which there's racism and sexism in gaming, of course. Um, but they were never able to really say no. this is wrong and this is why this is wrong, and this point A, point B. They can't make an argument other than argue against uh, this thing that they're racist and sexist and homophobic and all these things.
And part of what sparked off the stuff before Gamergate, the 2 weeks prior, you could say, you had this ongoing Quinspiracy controversy, the burgers and
Yes.
fries thing, also, and there were people who were talking about ethical reforms and looking into that. People who were talking about, um, a lot of people were talking about drama, and
Hmm.
you had some people who were actually harassing Quinn, probably, or talking about
Oh,
it.
yeah, they definitely did receive Quinn, and then eventually Brianna Wu, and of course Anita Sarkeesian. They definitely had what pretty much anyone, I think, would any reasonable person would consider at least some harassment. Uh, it's a lot of it now. I would say I would caution and say it's not really harassment on a lot of it, but they certainly received inappropriate contact. They received phone calls. Uh, of course, the FBI looked into it as well. But a big part of what they received was just kind of a feature of Twitter, and not a bug. If you get on Twitter and you say something, you take the position X, and that position is wildly unpopular. Well, there's nothing stopping the whole world from saying, no, you're an idiot. I believe Y. So if you are, if you see somebody saying X and you believe Y, well, you're well within your right to say, well, no, that's not what I believe, and I believe Y. But if you're on the receiving end, if you say, I believe X, and all of a sudden you have 10,000 people saying, no, you're an idiot, we believe Y, it certainly feels like harassment when you're on the receiving end. But that's not really the case. But then they did also receive some absolutely outlandish stuff that they should not have received. So, it's hard to tie that down, but for the most part, you know, as Total Biscuit said, well, no one was actually hurt. So, these death threats are horrible. They shouldn't receive death threats, but were they legitimate? You can't blame them for feeling bad about receiving a death threat, obviously. But well, I've received death threats from their side, from the anti-GamerGate side, and it sucks to receive, but well, I don't actually believe anyone is going to try to kill me over opinions about gaming journals.
Yeah, obviously, nobody was harmed in like the normal sense of harm. Um, but like it does kind of suck when somebody releases your address and you get phone calls. You have to like
Yeah.
I've gone through that myself. Unfortunately, due to my participation in GamerGate, I was harassed by a group of third-party trolls. They might
Yep.
be they might be the ones who went after you, or was it anti-GamerGate people went after you? I don't know. You said anti-GamerGate people did.
I had anti-GamerGate, but you also had these, GamerGate as a whole was a haven, absolute haven for trolling. And you have a really good article by David Auerbach warning uh, warning everybody about it, and it came out true that uh, anyone could come in and say, "Oh, I'm anti-GamerGate" or "I'm pro-GamerGate," and play the other side and say, "Oh, here are death threats against one side or the other." It was just a paradise for trolls.
Yeah, and there
And
were good.
yeah, and there's a whole website, Something Awful, which got involved,
Yeah.
and they it was they were responsible for, I can't quantify how much of a mess, but they were responsible for a significant part of the mess.
Yeah, that's part of the story that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yep.
Um, that Something Awful's involvement. I've always heard of Something Awful's involvement. One of the anti-Gamergate people I talked to even said that they were a Something Awful poster. Though she says that I don't think she was active on Something Awful during Gamergate. I'm not sure, but people
Hmm.
have definitely made that connection before, and obviously they had a long-running beef with 4chan.
Yep. Yep. And there are several gaming journalists and actual journalists who are or were part of something awful as well.
Well,
So,
and they
yeah,
say too, people say that it wasn't the entire Something Awful community. This was a huge website. Still is
right.
a huge website. It was like specific groups within it, like the Goon Swarm group. They say Hell
Hmm.
Dump,
Yep.
things like that.
Yep. Yep. And, of which Zoe Quinn was a part. Um, so yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, Aaron Joni was a part of it too, I believe, right?
I
Not Hell Dump, to clarify, but Something Awful.
yeah, I believe so.
Because I believe I've heard it from multiple people. Um, I've never seen the archive. That was before people archived shit. But
Yeah,
apparently he posted his letter about Zoe
yeah,
Quinn on
he
Something
posted it in
Awful originally. That was before the blog post. It was originally a Something Awful post. That's
yeah, I
what
think he posted it
anti
in a couple places.
yeah, that's what he posted on Penny Arcade and Something Awful. That's what anti Gamergate people say.
Yeah.
So if they're willing to say it, and so are pro Gamergate people, it's probably true. That he posted it there first. The Something Awful community, though, I guess he was hoping that they would side with him, but
Hmm.
ultimately they ended up siding with Zoe instead, and so he made the blog post.
Yeah. 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 That was those were fun times.
But I'm interviewing Aaron, so I'll just ask him, I guess.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Do you think that there were negative aspects to gaming culture?
Oh, of course, definitely. But and it. Well, I don't know if I want to say. Yeah, I will say it's negative, but it's going back since the days of, oh God, the name is skipping me. The guy the lawyer who was very, anti-violent video games. What's his name?
Oh, Jack Thompson.
Yeah, God. Um, with Jack Thompson, you could see that he received the same treatment that Anita Sarkeesian received. Basically, Anita Sarkeesian's treatment was a bit more gendered. Of course, it was a bit more, you're a woman, so we're coming after you. And Jack Thompson just received, you're an asshole, we're coming after you. Of course, he received pizzas. He got the whole death threats and everything. Yeah, that could have been handled better by gamers. But at that point, when it was Jack Thompson, it was the media was behind the gamers. The media was representing
Well,
the
the
gamers
games
at that
press was at least. I don't know about
time.
mainstream press as much.
Yeah, yeah, the gaming media. Um, and then when it came time for Anita Sarkeesian, that's when the gaming press was different. And oh no, you can't do this with a woman. Um, you can't treat her the way that you treated Jack Thompson. So, yeah, it, you know, it's obviously not good that uh, death threats are so easily transmitted. That doxing is so easy to do. Uh, there is a problem in the gaming community with that stuff, but
Well, I might even disagree with you here, but let's go. Like, I'll let you finish your point.
sure. Well, it, it's never fun being doxxed, but personally, I don't think it's all that. Well, I don't want to say it's all that much of a problem because if you're receiving that kind of abuse, it's definitely a problem. But on the whole, I don't think being a gamer is any worse than any other fandom. If you go to sports, if you're a sports fan, obviously referees receive death threats, and uh, you got soccer players who have been killed if they miss a goal or if they miss a save, who've been beheaded for doing that. And if you're a soccer fan, you can certainly get your butt kicked in an opposing team stadium. So being a gamer is you've got kind of the same kind of behavior, but it's not quite as bad as as being a sports fan or other fandoms.
Yeah, I don't know if it's better or worse, but I do think that like this is just an internet phenomenon. I really do because like you said, sports people, various look at the Tumblr fandoms and how those people are like doxing and like threatening to kill each other all the time. It's
Yeah.
anytime you go on, I think this is like a dividing line too between like the pro and anti GamerGate people. Like the anti, well, they apply it so selectively too, but the pro GamerGate people, I think a lot of them are basically of the view that like, yeah, harassment is like bad, but like if you're a public figure, you're probably going to get like some level of harassment, and also you
Hmm.
probably shouldn't blame it on like people you don't even know who are doing it. And whereas like the anti-gamergate people, like a lot of them are basically like if there's any amount of harassment ever, like it's automatically whatever is happening is bad. But then like these are also the same people. Like I was talking with Bash Fluff, a Gamergate critic. I interviewed him, and he's defending cancel culture against Brendan Ike of Mozilla, and it's like, well, like you're like Gamergate's a harassment campaign because well, he doesn't believe that actually. He doesn't even believe Gamergate was a harassment campaign, but other anti-Gamergate people do. Um,
Hmm.
it's like they're gonna support like canceling people in some cases, the same exact people, but then they'll make excuses for Black Lives Matter and the violence associated with that, another leaderless hashtag movement. But then
Yeah.
like if even one person who may or may not even be a supporter of Gamergate sends like a death threat, it's like, oh, that's your whole movement. You have to like shut down everything now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a large part of it as well is the language, and I've talked about this before. The language of the what I call the social justice left, or the I guess you could now mostly call the woke left, on especially on Twitter. Of course, from Tumblr, but then Tumblr came to Twitter. Uh, but a large part of them, they really believe that words are a form of violence. Uh, there's some of them that say that dead naming a transgender person, they say dead naming is violence. Just the act of saying, you know, someone's previous name, that's is violence. So you have different languages between the two sides. Uh, you have the one side, that like the pro gamergate side, where they know their their humor tends to be a little bit edgier, uh, depending on how far you get into the gamergate people, uh, and they're fine with that. They're fine with saying, swearing at each other. They're fine with trash talking each other. It's been happening in video games for ever since video games were made, and it's been happening in sports ever since sports were made. It's just something that happens. And then on uh, the side that was very, very, very actively against Gamergate, uh, they were very much promoting a concept of language as violence. Hate speech is violence, uh, and they're kind of really interested in controlling speech. So you always have that fight between the two, where you have one side that wants to say anything, and you have another side that says, well, saying anything against us pretty much is violence. So it's you're not going to come to a much agreement between the two.
Very astute observation. So,
Thank you.
do you have any thoughts on games journalism, or do you even care about games journalism?
I used to. um, I was in a Facebook group called oh, what was it? It was Freelance Game Journalists Group, where for the most part you talk about oh, this publication is wanting articles on this, or there's a job here that you can apply for. And then there's some talk of other things, and Gamergate came up a few times, and I kind of talked about my survey a little bit, and eventually they kicked me out of the group because they really didn't like me for doing that. Uh, in particular, uh, that was when the the guy with the Escapist, Russ Pitts, uh, he bought the Escapist, and he was its editor in chief, and he disagreed. He wrote an article to say, hey, we need to come together with Gamergate. The people in Gamergate, they're gamers. The anti-Gamergate, they're gamers. We need to. We're years past it now. We need to come together. And Zoe Quinn wrote a tweet that was I forget what she said, but it was not very kind to Russ Pitts. It was very militant, and militantly disagreeing with him about that. And I wrote a tweet. Well, Russ Pitts eventually lost his job, even though he owned the damn publication. He had to remove himself from it, from all the people going after him for saying, he just wants everyone to get together and be peaceful. So I said, well, you know, they say to look at the person oppressed is the person that does not have the power. And I say, well, if you look at that situation, who is the person that had the power? The guy who owned the publication, who had to actually leave his own publication when he said something so milk toast that well, Zoe Quinn went after him. Or does Zoe Quinn have the power here? And so they kicked me out of the group for that. They did not like me tweeting that Zoe Quinn had the power there. Um, and that is game journalism. That's they right now, or at least back then, as a few years ago, they do not at all welcome opposing voices, not whatsoever. They are fiercely protective of their own, uh, and they believe themselves to be cultural critics of much importance. When these are just video games for the most part. They're culturally important. They're fun, but I don't think there's any reason to treat them so seriously as they do. So, game journalism to me is not. It's it's a field of people who are, for the most part, very lowly paid for putting out content that, for the most part, is just there to get clicks. There's very little interesting in the world of game journalism that's actually interesting,
So they kick you out of
unfortunately.
this group, and they have a very, I guess, again, non-pluralistic mindset where it's their view or the highway
Yeah. Oh
essentially.
yeah.
Do you feel like you got blacklisted from the games journalism because of this? Because
Oh
of your
yeah.
more
Yeah.
more fair coverage?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Um, although I feel that it, I'm not sure if it's so much me. Although I know that there were people there on that Facebook group that basically said that they would never want to work with me. Of course. Um, but I think with the publications, it's largely by topic. Uh, when I had my article about Nolan Bushnell, who uh, just quickly, he was accused of sexual harassment by Brianna Wu because she read an article about him in Playboy a long time ago, and uh, she thinks that he should not have won the award from the GDC, and so the next day the GDC actually took the award away from him. And the problem with that was that none of the women who ever worked with Nolan Bushnell have ever accused him of sexual harassment. They thought he was a great guy, and so I talked to all these people who worked with them, and they were furious with Brianna Wu. I could not get that article published. That's when I talked to the creator of Pong. I talked to several of the women who worked with Nolan Bushnell at Atari back then. So I talked to primary sources, people that worked with them, and none of the publications would touch it. Said, nope, that's too controversial. That's one of the websites that it's too controversial. So whether they blacklist me or not, or they just blacklist, any article that is too controversial, carries a topic that they don't really want to discuss. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I do see Brianna Wu's tweet. Oh well, she still has me blocked, I think maybe. Though I've been talking with her in private, so
Oh, yeah, I have opinions about her. Yeah, she's got me blocked too. She did not like me talking to the women of Atari, which was okay.
so I'm reading through her tweets now. So she's basically alleged that he had hosted parties, board meetings in his hot tub,
Yes, yes, which
and
was
the
yeah,
board would invite the women employees they wanted to have sex with up to the suite and pressure them to strip naked for the men, she says.
yes, that's what she says.
And she says it's from the book Ultimate History of Video Games.
Oh, okay. Well, I know she had attributed the story of they said that they were holding a board meeting in the hot tub, and they brought a secretary up to the hot tub. And they said, hey, she was bringing them some materials, and uh, they said, hey, why don't you, you know, they pressured her to join them in the hot tub, and so that came from Brianna Wu. That was her interpretation of the event. She said this was told by Nolan Bushnell, and it wasn't. It was told by Al Alcorn, who he was the creator of Pong, or is cited as the creator of Pong. And he was the one that told the story, and I talked to him about it, and he said, "Well, yeah, Atari was famous for they would have employees in the hot tub. Uh, Atari was a very interesting company where they were smoking weed and they were in the hot tub and they had parties and according to the women at Atari that I spoke with, they said it went both ways. There was uh, the women were very forward and the men were forward. They said, it was a good time, but there was no sexual harassment of any kind. And Al Alcorn said with that secretary, they had her bring them materials, and then they said, would you like to join us in the hot tub? She said no, and that was it. They, it was just that was it. So it wasn't really any kind of an interesting story, even. But Brianna Wu misinterpreted it, and it got loose, and all these people, like Jennifer Shirley, who was a game developer, and they got a hold of that and started the hashtag Not Nolan campaign, and of course, the media follows these people like Brianna Wu and these others, these progressive social justice minded indie developers, and they wrote about it just on the basis of what was it, I think about 30 tweets, that they had, and they said, "Oh, there's this campaign to get rid of him." And the next day, yeah, they took his award away. I confronted Brianna Wu with the evidence. I said, we have all these women who say no, there was no sexual harassment whatsoever. And Brianna Wu's only comment to me was that I'm a shitty journalist and uh, I don't have a publisher, and she's not going to talk to me.
I've got a lot of questions about games journalism. Well, not a lot, but like a few. I'm not sure how deep you want to go into this topic.
Well, I didn't get all that involved in the actual game journalism. Um, I published a few articles here and there, but nothing much. But I can answer whatever question you have.
Well, I feel like we've already covered some of them. Like, why do you think the
Yeah,
games press was largely unresponsive to calls for reform? Well, what do you say?
yeah, because that's not in their nature. They they with the game journalists, it's conform or die. If you don't believe the same way as every other game journalist, you're going to stand out and you're going to get whacked.
Were there any specific reforms you would have liked to have seen happen in the industry? Well, you were neutral, of course, on GamerGate, but
Reforms. Mm, I would like to see games journalism go back to the way it used to be, where you had a whole bevy of different opinions, where you had, uh, you know, give me, give me a social media or a social justice website, fine, but also give me a good website uh, that isn't social justice minded, that is just wants to play games or whatever. But unfortunately, we don't have that. So, and all the attempts that have tried that have not been great.
if you were the editor in chief of a gaming website and some of your employees were accused of ethical violations, what would you have done?
Well, it depends on the ethical violation. If it's like GamerGate, if I had Grayson um, covering, then well, I would have uh, if I were at that time, I would have uh, told everybody, okay, let me take a look at what happened, and we'll see what happened. And uh, if there was a actual violation, then well, I don't know if I would fire them for that, or if it's a fireable offense or not. But I would have at least, listened to the complaints where that wasn't. I wouldn't go on the attack right away. I would say, okay, you guys have concerns about our ethics. I understand that. Uh, let us know what you think, and we'll work on it. And then after a while, I would publish something saying, okay, we've heard you guys. This is what you want, uh, and at the very least, take some steps that maybe the steps don't actually matter all that much. But as I said, perspective is everything. So uh, at least do something, and say, hey, you guys are our readers. You matter. We've heard you. We're listening to you. We're going to make some changes, and whether or not those changes are big or not, say uh, we'll do what you guys want to build your trust again. That just something simple could have ended GamerGate like that. It's but they didn't. They came out with, oh no, these gamers are over. These gamers are dead to us. These people are all misogynists. And, they went on the attack, and GamerGate became, here we are almost 10 years later talking about it still.
So you don't pay attention to games journalism too much anymore. You said. Do you think that there's still a role for good games journalism out there?
Oh yeah, I think I think if there was someone who was willing to make the sacrifice, because it's not the most lucrative business in the world, uh, I think you could have some good investigative journalism in video games, but it's difficult. It's difficult to get published. It's difficult to uh, it's difficult to publish articles that are interesting, and they're not, because the game companies control the narrative for the most part. How are you going to find out new information on a video game from a private company? Well, the private company is going to have to give out that information. So it's not always easy to come up with interesting stuff. So it's a difficult field, but uh, I think it could certainly be more interesting than it is now.
I know you've already talked about this a little bit when you mentioned them planning to send a gift to Zoe Quinn and collusion. But do you have any thoughts on
Mhm.
the Game Journal Pros mailing list?
Oh yeah, I would say that's totally inappropriate. I don't understand why these competitors are talking to each other like that. Uh, when I'm in journalism, I I'm wanting to compete against other journalists. I want to scoop other journalists. I want to, with the Nolan Bushnell article, I came out with that a week before Kotaku finally came up with their own article. Yeah, that's right. I got that out a week before you did. That. So talking to each other all the time, I can understand. If you want to support each other and all that, but talking that much about their specifics, what's going on with their websites, is very, very weird, very unprofessional in my book.
Have you seen the website that some GamerGate supporters have created, known as Deep Freeze?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, well, I haven't looked at it in quite a while, but I don't think it's very consequential. I think it's, yeah, go ahead and collate a bunch of uh, ethical violations, but how useful is that to anybody? Are you, when you're reading an article now, does it matter so much? Are you going to look on Deep Freeze to see if the writer is listed on there? So I don't know how useful it is, uh, but yeah, you know, I don't mind it at all.
Do you think it's useful for us to, well, not us, but like the people who made this project to catalog what websites are corrupt in detail and which ones are willing to correct ethical violations when they're uncovered versus which ones aren't, things like that?
I don't think it's entirely useful because GamerGate has been against Kotaku and Polygon for almost 10 years now, and Kotaku and Polygon are still there. These are websites that are funded by very large corporations that are willing to not make money and publish anyways. They're willing to lose money while publishing. You saw that with Gawker, of course. Of course, there comes a time where they have to have a reckoning, and Kotaku has kind of seen that. For the most part, the people at Kotaku now have turned over, and the people who were around at the time of GamerGate, and they're in other places. Of course, you got Totillo. He's off doing his thing, and uh, Jason Schreier, he's off with Bloomberg, and uh, so they've all turned over. So I don't think it's entirely useful to have that information. I don't think it's really bad to have that information, but say, oh, this group is corrupt, and this group is okay, and that's fine to have that, but I don't think it's entirely useful.
Okay, because I would think that this is like a very useful resource for to inform the public about this, and also to hold them to account and keep track
Well,
of what goes wrong.
for the most part, normies, you know, aren't going to look at that kind of a thing before they, Kotaku and Polygon and any website makes their money on SEO. They make their money when one of their articles comes up on your phone on the Google thing or whatever. Uh, that's where they make their money. So um, the people who are clicking on those are not looking up websites to see, oh, is Kotaku up and up? Is this website fine? So I don't think from that standpoint that's you're not going to be able to defeat the clicks from the SEO kind of articles.
All right. Have you seen the SPJ Airplay conference?
Yes, yes, I was mentioned in that. That was right around the time where I came out with my interview with GamerGate on Reddit.
What did you think of it?
I thought that was pretty fun. I thought that overall that was pretty good. It would have been nice if there weren't all the bomb threats and that they were had things together. It would have been nice if there were some anti Gamergate people there to talk, but of course you don't get anybody. Um, but I think it was pretty useful. I think I really like Koretsky. He's a fun guy. I talked to him a bit. I thought he handled it about as well as he can, and he of course got some blowback for talking about it and for engaging gamers in ethics and journalism. But I think a whole lot of people became a lot more educated about journalism from that than otherwise would have. Yeah, I think it was a pretty interesting event
Why do you think the media didn't cover it?
because of Gamergate. They didn't want to approach that mess because they can't understand, or they couldn't, and they still can't understand Gamergate. And worse than them not understanding Gamergate is them not being able to convince the readers why they should understand Gamergate. So if they can't write a paragraph saying this is Gamergate, this is what it's about, and this is why you should care about it, then they're not going to approach it.
Now, within the movement, I'm not sure if you were paying attention to this at the time. There was a divide. Some people thought that Gamergate should have ended with SPJ Airplay, and were actively trying to bring about that outcome, whereas others believed that there was still a lot of work that needed to be done. Did you interact with that at all, or did you have any thoughts on that at the time, as a neutral
Uh,
observer?
I didn't really have any thoughts on that. I know, of course, this was what this was 2 years. I think this was 2016, so 2 years after Gamergate.
No,
So
this
yeah,
was 2015. Yeah,
was it 2015?
yeah, Airplay was 2015. It was summer
Wow.
2015.
Oh, okay. Yes, my survey came out in 2016. That's
Yeah.
why. Um, so this was a year. A year of arguing online is is enough for a lot of people. So I understand them. Um, and I don't think it made much of a difference because you had a lot of turnover in Gamergate. You had the stalwarts, and you had some people who would well, some people in there went from pro GamerGate to anti GamerGate to back to pro GamerGate, and uh, it's a whole lot to be in the fight. There was a lot to keep track of, and so I understood the divide, uh, but I don't think it mattered too much to the
Yeah.
movement because
And
that
the
was the
divide
time
was
where
pretty small. It's it was
yeah.
I'm the one who nuked the plan. But they had a number of e-celebs on board with the idea,
Hmm.
on from various different communities.
Yeah, well,
But
GamerGate was an e-celeb manufacturer. The number of people that came out of GamerGate with a whole lot of money
yeah,
is pretty staggering. That's one of the more interesting aspects of GamerGate to me.
yeah,
Candace Owens.
for better. Well, Candace, she wasn't even involved with GG in any
No,
capacity.
she wasn't even really involved, but you can look back. She is a result of GamerGate because she got into it with Zoe Quinn because of her stupid
Her
um,
her, her website.
her oh God, that bully,
Yeah,
the anti-bullying website, or the what was it? They were going to dox people or something,
yeah.
or no, that was
Well,
bully
it
bully
was. I
hunters.
don't. I don't. It was so long ago. I don't remember all the exact details. So I don't want to like casually talk about it.
Yeah.
It with specifics. But yeah, it is wild that Candace Owens, um, who now is obviously a very popular like right wing podcast host with Ben Shapiro,
Hmm.
that she started her entire career basically by launching an anti-bullying website that had a lot of controversies about it, and
Hmm.
got into a personal beef with Zoe Quinn, and then she
Yes.
disappeared off the internet for a few years and came back basically as a
Yeah.
YouTuber.
Yeah. She. Yeah. Well, she used her fight with Zoe Quinn and a couple of Zoe Quinn's people, like Randy Harper. Oh, I have things to say about her, but she used that to kind of be her little springboard. She kind of turned into this right wing darling, and she went with it once she found her footing. Uh,
I'm pretty
so
sure she disappeared off the internet for a couple years though, after like in between,
I I don't know.
because like everyone
Yeah, I
chat
don't.
on her project
Yeah,
on her website. And also,
yeah,
she was like a high school kid, or like just out of high school, maybe. So at the
yeah.
time,
Yeah, it was bad. Uh, but yeah, that's the only reason I think most people knew her was because of that controversy. And then you know, I don't remember her going away, but I don't really remember
and maybe she did.
her
Maybe I'm
whole
mistaken on this.
beginning. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. Her, Sargon, of course. Uh, well, of course, the what GamerGate called the literally who's Randy Harper, uh, Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu. They all made well into the some very high six figures.
Well, it
Uh,
sounds like you didn't agree with, or you didn't get along very well with Randy Harper.
yeah, Randy Harper lied about me. She said that as a journalist, I contacted her mother uh, to talk about, I don't know, I guess Randy Harper. I don't know why I would contact her mother. But she made the claim that I contacted her mother. I called her mother to talk about Randy Harper, which I never did. Absolutely never. You know, I offered her my phone records to see that I would never call her mother. That sounds like the least interesting thing I could ever do. Uh, and so I tweeted that. I said, if you can prove that, I will jump off of Twitter forever. And of course, she just blocked me and wouldn't say anything else. So she's one of the only people that I have on permanent block on Twitter.
And we'll be getting into the pro and anti GamerGate people you interact with a little bit later. But
Sure.
for some people, GamerGate was also about creative freedom and the right of artists to make the games and works of art that they'd like without fear of censorship or shoddy localizations.
Hmm.
Um, what did you think of that aspect of GamerGate? Did you cover that at all?
I didn't cover it. I know that's a large part of what GamerGate wants. That is obviously a difficult ask because these are private decisions that these companies make, and we'll never really know for sure, for the most part, what kind of pressures they're under. Obviously, you have the pandering, uh, as I said, from Volition with Saints Row 4, where they're pandering. Of course, I don't know if you saw that recent South Park episode, the Panderverse.
No, I've not.
Uh, oh, you need to see that. Um, which talks about Disney pandering. Um, but clearly, Volition with Saints Row, they pandered to their audience, and it didn't work out. And um, there have been people that have spoken up and said that they have felt pressure to do things certain ways, to write characters certain ways, uh, and of course, some people are saying that that's just the pressures of business. You know, it's really hard to pretty much everyone would say you want to have creative freedom. And of course, you're always going to have restrictions when you're working on a commercial product. So that's a really difficult topic to
Yeah,
cover
and
and
to
to
clarify, like I don't think people in GamerGate, most of them at least, cared about like if you want to make like a shitty game and like it's
yeah,
unsuccessful, who cares? That's your right to make a bad product basically.
yeah,
We'll let it succeed or fail in the market, but everyone should have creative freedom, including progressive social justice people. They want to make their games, etc.
yep, yeah. That's I understand that's Gamergate's position. Um,
Well, that's my position. Like, and I
oh
I don't know if I
yeah,
can speak for everybody, but I
uh,
think that I
I
feel
think it's pretty
confident saying
clear.
that that was our position. I feel
Yeah,
confident
I would.
saying that.
Yeah.
No, there
Um,
were some people who were more culture warrior and were not consistent in their principles.
mhm, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to get a good bead on creative freedom because for a writer on a significant project, they're never going to speak freely. Uh, you have people that it, they say it's a closed market. It's a tight knit market, so they know all the writers are known to everybody else, and so of course they feel pressure to themselves conform in certain ways. Um, but uh, when you ask a developer, I've talked to a few developers about it, and they they of course they all want creative freedom, but then they also a lot of them they can't go public with the pressures that they feel.
Right, and obviously there's always gonna be like some degree of like pressures from the studio, from the executives, from the studios, the publishers
Hmm.
to try and like meet deadlines, things like that. And like that's just a part of the industry. Um,
Hmm.
but I think what I took issue with was this idea of multiple different things, I guess, and I think a lot of other people did too. It's like it's a mix of there's like multiple different things happening at once. There's campaigns directly to try and pressure developers into changing games, right? So,
Hmm.
or to take stuff out of their games, like change the cover in comics and Pillars of Eternity controversy, things like that. Then at
Yep.
the same time, there's also people saying that video games cause real world harm, because they
Yep.
promote sexist attitudes in real life, and that can have like a chilling effect potentially, or has certain implications that would seem to follow from that. Like if they do cause real world harm, what do you do about that? And
Yeah.
then you also have people who are like just making critiques that are dumb, but like are probably harmless and part of living in a free society where you have like a diverse set of opinions and people hear each other out.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
dumb,
Well,
dumb,
there's
dumb opinion pieces.
yeah, a lot of those out there. There was a developer. I forget, name escapes me. She was just writing about. Uh, I think it was a Japanese game. Um, where there was some pressure to. Uh, the Japanese tend to have, their fighting games where you got the Chun Li or whoever they have characters that are not at current American standards of dress for their females. Um, a lot of times, anyway. And so they talk about that, and they say, "Well, we want to make a game where you have sexy women." And uh, of course, a lot of women want to have sexy women in video games as well. Uh, that's the female power fantasy, I guess you could say. Uh, but they also feel pressure to have what she called was more representation and more diversity, more inclusiveness. So what I thought was most interesting there was how she framed it, having the creative freedom to have a character being sexy. uh, she is for that. She's for that creative freedom. The alternative to a sexy character is considered representation, inclusive, and diverse, which are all, of course, very important buzzwords nowadays, and they mean inherently good. So, if you are inclusive, then of course who doesn't want to be inclusive? If you're against inclusiveness, then you are uh, against good. You are evil, fighting against good. Uh, so it's really important in how she framed the dichotomy between something being an attractive woman character and inclusiveness. So that's the important thing, is how this argument is being framed by the people who are making this argument, saying, "Oh no, we can't have these sexist characters because they are not inclusive." And so, if they are able to pass that off, then they kind of win that argument, by saying not saying our side is right, but they're saying our side is good and the other side is evil.
Do you have any thoughts on these campaigns that some political activists engaged in, like hashtag change the cover?
Uh, I'm not really familiar with Change the Cover.
Okay.
Is that with the comic book?
Yeah, that was the comic book one involving Batgirl, but we can skip it if you're not familiar.
Oh, yeah, I'm not really familiar. I'm generally for creative freedom as well, um, with the understanding that there are market pressures and that sometimes you got to sell out to sell covers.
What do you think the lines are between criticism and advocacy of censorship?
Hmm. I guess I would have to see the case. Um, do you mean whether the, the the critique is actually calling for censorship?
Well, I guess you could interpret it however you'd like the question. I leave it pretty open-ended.
That's that's what we do in survey questions. Whenever anyone asks, could you elaborate? You always say, well, it's whatever you think it means. Uh, um, boy, I would say it depends on the developer. You you have to have a developer who's strong enough to be willing to tell people to screw off. You know, uh, most of the developers I talk to, uh, well, first they all they all want to be off the record. They don't want to go public with their thoughts, but uh, they are not fans of modern day criticism. Yeah, they are fine with being criticized. Every one of them is fine with being criticized, and I've criticized them too. I've talked to them about their games, saying, I don't like this part or whatever. Um, but they think it's ridiculous how all criticism nowadays is so based on identity politics that it's just frustrating to them. And so that's why I've talked to a lot of them, was where they come to me and where they can complain. And I tell them, I know.
Do you have any thoughts on when content is removed from foreign games, removed or changed during localization?
Yes, I think the let's see, how do I put that? Again, I'm for creative freedom. I think the interpreter should interpret it. I would like, when I play a game, to know what the designers originally intended, personally, anyways. And I'm sure most people in GamerGate would agree with that. Uh, give it to me as the developer intended, even if they're Japanese and the joke is going to be about something I have no idea about. It's going to be something I don't understand. Don't Americanize it, uh, and don't interpret it like that and try and pass it off as this is the American version of the humor. I mean, we've heard now from several Japanese developers saying that they've had to uh, change things for the American market to conform so that it uh, they can um, they can reach out to the American market and be I don't know, well, I guess pander to the social justice left, uh, pretty much, uh, to the political correctness that's going on in the United States right now, and it's a sad thing for me to see that people should. I would like to see developers saying, "Oh, we're going to develop this for the American market. That means we can do whatever the hell we want." Um, but instead, especially for a role-playing game, uh, if you want political correctness, then that's what you're going to get from an American or North American, American or Canada developer. You pretty much have to go to Eastern Europe nowadays for Larian and CD Project Red, and even them even those groups are influenced by it, but uh, those games are going to be more like the older American games that are less political mess, I guess you could say.
All right. Anything you want to talk about regarding the email campaigns like Operation Disrespectful Nod that Gamergate supporters engaged in?
I thought that was very fun and interesting as a third party. Um, I thought that was kind of brilliant, to tell you the truth, from GamerGate to that was strategically and tactfully well, a good move. Uh, it definitely cost the the companies, the media companies, some money, um, some significant money, and so I think it was effective, and uh, it was a brilliant move. You know, to run a campaign like that is, I think, you know, people often talk about the tactics of GamerGate tactics, and they, you know, whenever you see that, I've said this on Twitter before, but 99% of the time you see someone say that, it's bullshit. They have no idea what they're talking about. Um,
Correct.
but but this email campaign, this actually was one of the GamerGate tactics, and it was very effective. And uh, you know, I guess you could say GamerGate misrepresented themselves, or you know, this is not what, especially when was Intel dropped whoever they dropped. I forget who they dropped. Um, one of their advertising campaigns that they hoodwinked them. You know, but you know, it's an email campaign. It's nothing new. People have been writing email campaigns and you know letter writing campaigns before the internet. People have on boycotts and everything. People have been doing that all the time. But this was a different move from gamers specifically, and so I thought it was definitely interesting and as I said, effective.
All right, now we're getting more into your area a little bit.
Okay.
You did the research, so what are Gamergate's political leanings?
I would say all over the board. I would say it's not that intelligent to approach Gamergate as a political organization overall, or with the mindset of a left or right wing group. There are there's right wingers and there's left wingers all throughout Gamergate. So I think anyone who wants to understand Gamergate and who's talking about left wing versus right wing and all that, I think they would be much better served by ignoring all that and mostly thinking of Gamergate as, you know, well, pissed off gamers.
I agree. Insofar as there were trends, though,
Mm-hmm.
what did you see in the data? Or as in terms
Uh,
of like the breakdown of like okay, like 70% are left wing or 70% are right wing versus or maybe not even that like or how what were the breakdowns in terms of people's views though?
well,
And
I
on
would
what issues?
say uh, if you if you wanted to peg Gamergate down, you would call them more libertarian because they were. What did we ask them? We asked them questions about health care, marijuana legalization, um, all sorts of stuff, and on the death penalty, um, global warming, affirmative action.
What did they say
See,
on
I
each
had
of
my data
these?
here in front of me. Let's see. Yeah, for the most part, it's a liberal response. Gay marriage. For gay marriage, Gamergate was very dominantly pro gay marriage and pro universal health care and pro abortion, pro choice abortion, I guess you could say. Um, so those are what are considered left wing views. You know, it's very pro marijuana legalization. Um, Gamergate understand has a left wing view on global warming. Um, they did not have a left wing view on affirmative action. So that would indicate more of a libertarian mindset.
All right. Thank you. That's interesting to explore for the book for sure because this gives the readers direct insight into what
Hmm.
exactly the political leanings of Gamergate were on various issues.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your
Let's see what I
political?
have.
Oh, God.
Uh, well, I'm looking at my my paper here. What we have is part of whenever you do a political survey, you ask people, self-identify. What do they self-identify as? And more than 54% of Gamergate said either slightly liberal or liberal. So that goes up to 54, 61, about 62% total liberal, uh, either extremely liberal, liberal, or slightly liberal. So that's a pretty definite left bias on Gamergate.
All right. Do you want to talk about your personal political views or philosophy?
I um I don't think mine really matter.
Yeah, well, to be clear, I'm using the question list I'm using for you is for Gamergate neutral people, which is what I consider you, and I think you referred to yourself as a third party at one point.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, I would say
so
I'm well.
we can skip it if you don't
I
want to
don't.
talk about it because it's not really relevant, but it's up to you.
I just don't think I'm that interesting. But yeah, I would say I'm kind of actually against Gamergate. My not really against Gamer, not like I'm fighting against Gamergate, but what I kind of wanted to do was help people understand Gamergate so that you know hopefully everyone could come together and start understanding each other, and knowing it. Hey, these people aren't evil. These people aren't good. Uh, but there wasn't even an attempt at understanding the sides here, and so a lot of what I wanted to do was to promote that understanding to see maybe, hey, we can come together and start figuring things out. Of course, that wouldn't even come close to happening. But yeah, so well, I guess you could say in that sense, I was kind of against gamer. I was hoping that the controversy would wouldn't erupt so much. I was hoping to, kind of put a damper on things.
All right.
But that was
Well, you that's
that was
actually
time that did that.
you thought that by approaching the conversation in the way that you did, that you could have actually brought an end to Gamergate essentially, but on terms that everybody or
Well,
most people could be happy with.
I don't know if I could. I wouldn't say I could end GamerGate, but I was hoping to at least get the discussion to a point where it started to be where we look at each other as people instead of, oh, this is a harassment slash hate group of monster terrorists, uh, and and get away from this us versus them, and because there really is more in common among people who were pro Gamergate and anti Gamergate than there is between people who know what Gamergate is and people who just have no clue whatsoever.
Why do
If
you?
you go out to I have a test called a Midwestern bar test. If you go out to any bar in a small town in the Midwest that's on Main Street, a brick building, you go into the bar, go into the wooden door with the sign atop it, and you go in there and you see guys wearing Carhartt at the bar drinking cheap beer, and you approach them with a subject. What do they say? If you're going to talk to them about Gamergate, they're they're not going to, you're never going to reach them. They're gone by the time you say Gamergate. Uh, so, in my opinion, you're not going to reach those people. So to me, it was more about promoting understanding with the people who, well, if you say GamerGate, they would kind of at least know a little bit about what you're talking about.
Do you think that you had any impact at all on this?
I think, uh, boy, I don't know. I think at least some people felt that they were heard. I had, some people say that, they're speaking out on Gamergate because they wanted to be heard. They had an opinion and they wanted that opinion known. Um, and so I think I helped at least some people feel heard. I hope so, anyway. Um, whether it had much of an impact, I don't know.
Well, I did cite your data for my first book because I think it's good data. So,
No, good.
and I'm interviewing you
Yeah, it.
now, so
That's true.
you're gonna be in two books, I guess, at least. Yeah, I think it was good data. I think that's important because we don't have a lot of data about Gamergate. There really isn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm proud of the survey. This was the first time I've been published. In a an American Psychological Association paper, peer reviewed. So that was pretty cool.
You were published in a, but your book research was
Yeah, being Professor Ferguson.
Neil
Yeah,
Ferguson.
we were published in uh, Professor Christopher
Oh,
Ferguson.
I don't know who that is.
Chris
Sorry.
Ferguson. Oh, you got to talk to him,
He wrote about Gamergate.
or you should follow him anyway. He was the primary author. He's a professor, and he approached me and said, "Hey, I saw what you did with your data. I think we can come up with a paper based on your data, and let's get it published." And so he, of course, he did most of the writing because I'm just, some idiot schmuck. He's a professor he's done a lot of research into like violence in video games and uh, a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, if you want to get me in
So
touch with
he,
him, I'd be willing to
yeah,
talk
well,
to him.
you can just follow him on
Though maybe
Twitter
not
and get a hold of him.
maybe not for the book though, since I've got 50 people. So
Yeah, yeah, I know the feeling.
yeah. All right. So some of these questions I don't really feel are super relevant given your role as a neutral. Most of these questions are designed for people who are neutral and engaged in the discussion on both sides, like people who like debated it on Reddit but were neutral. But you know what? Fuck it, I'll ask it. Are you okay with gaming
Sure.
sites criticizing games through a political or religious lens, such as a Marxist, feminist, Christian, or other lens?
Yes, but I won't read it because it's boring.
Do you think that there's any value in analyzing games or other works of art through a political lens?
Um, uh, boy, that's a. Oof, I think there's value in it. Personally, honestly, no. I If somebody comes out with something like take Cyberpunk, great game, uh, very uh, a lot of political themes in Cyberpunk. Uh, if somebody writes politically about Cyberpunk, which of, of course somebody should, you should have people writing politically about it and looking at it through a political lens, and are these the right decisions these characters make, and under what kind of environment they're making it. But are those opinions interesting to me? No.
Some people say
I mean,
that. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
50 years old though. I'm 50 years old. I I have my political opinions, and those are probably not going to be changed by uh, some someone writing about cyberpunk.
All right.
You
Some
know,
people would say
this
that
damn kid should get off my lawn.
some people say that GamerGate was the first battle of the culture war. Do you have any thoughts on that framing?
First battle of the online culture war, probably. Uh, yeah, well, I think a lot of people in gamers say it's like the first time that people have fought back against the social justice thing. Uh, and I when I went to college in the early '90s, it was political correctness. You can't say freshmen anymore; it's first year persons, and uh, it was very much the social justice movement, but the prequel, and uh, people very much fought against it, and they won too. Because it went away for a while, but then it came back with a vengeance as the social justice movement. So um, I don't see this culture war thing as anything really new, but the online component is definitely different and new.
What do you think of the framing of Gamergate or the reaction to it as being a moral panic?
But the gamer gators were in a moral panic, or
Well, you can interpret it either way.
that's so not helpful. Uh,
Like either well,
um,
Gamergaters could be a moral panic against the feminists slash social justice warrior people who were talking about games in ways that they didn't like, or that the social justice warrior people who were advocating that games be changed or censored, that they were engaged in a moral panic. Or you could read it as the reaction to Gamergate by the mainstream media was a moral panic that blew basically a huge thing out of proportion. So you could like take it any number of ways, at least
yeah,
three
well, I think
ways.
I think I would say everything was blown out of proportion with Gamergate. Uh, it was uh, it was a cluster of fun, which every side had everything blown out of proportion. Let's see. I think that they called Gamergate reactionary. We talked about that a little bit before, where uh, people like to frame Gamergate as white male heterosexual gamers who don't want these diverse people intruding on their space. And I would imagine there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of truth to that in some areas of Gamergate. Um, but I would say that there's a tiny bit of that in just the general public. I don't think Gamergate is any different than what you're going to get out of the general public for the most part, or the gaming public anyway. I think those thoughts are way overblown. Uh, and I think that's a tidy little thing for people to say. Oh, these are people that don't want their gaming space to be intruded on. I think that's an easy narrative that overall did not ring true with me when I looked into it. So from the moral panic of that perspective, yeah, I think Gamergate is something that does not easily lend itself to definition. So any kind of a neat little package of description of Gamergate is going to be wrong.
Well, I still have one more framing to go through. We'll see if you still feel that way in a second.
Sure.
All right. So what do you think of the framing of Gamergate as a battle between those who believe in small L Enlightenment liberal values and those who don't?
No, no. I think a lot. There were obviously again there were people in Gamergate who were interested in doing the political battle. They wanted uh, they wanted the political battle. They wanted to go up against social justice warriors, and of course there were right wingers in there and everything. But I think most people in Gamergate, I think Gamergate could have been stopped by a media who would have just said, "Hey, you know what? Okay, we've heard you guys. We're sorry that you feel this way. We're going to work to do better. If they had come out with that, within the first week or two of Gamergate, I think it would have been over. So I don't think the political part of that would have come out if that had happened. And so I don't think it was a largely political movement.
I'm gonna be very disappointed, or maybe not, because I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck Gamergate was, even though I was a part of it for several years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was.
But if it turns out the answer is actually it's just about ethics in games journalism, then I'm going to be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, and that's the truth. It was about ethics in game journalism to some people.
Yeah.
To some people, it was a political fight. To some people, it was just an excuse to troll, and for some people, they just wanted to yell at Zoe Quinn. So, you know, pretty much whenever it says, what was Gamergate about? I say yes. It was about everything. It was a mess, uh, and you just have to listen to people in order to really make any headway out of it.
All right. So, what were your interactions with pro Gamergate people like?
For the most part, they were very positive. There were some very negative. I had some 8chan people really unhappy with me about the whole not being able to include them thing. Uh, and, they feel like I was not listening to them. But, I explained myself, but, they didn't really seem to understand. Um, I've had some people really upset that I have said before that Gamergate, that there was harassment that came from Gamergate supporters. Um, and I have said that uh, Gamergate itself wasn't the wasn't the smartest at all times with their communication with the public. Uh, Kind of bad PR, I thought, that they missed a lot of opportunities. Um, so yeah, I've had a lot of Gamergaters very unhappy with me for, some of them can't take any criticism whatsoever, and but for the most part, uh, pro Gamergate people have been uh, very happy with me for listening to them and for representing their opinions, at least for the most part, fairly.
When you say that they Gamergate people could have been better at PR, what do you mean?
Well, there were let's see, there were of course there was one Gamergator. I don't know if you know who, where this was when Brianna Wu, uh, when she got involved, and I'm no fan of Brianna Wu, but uh, she said that uh, early on she said that she had received these threats, so she had to leave her house to go to uh, a hotel, which I believe she did. Of course, she came back to that house like the next day to do interviews and stuff, self promoting. But at least one of the Gamergators, in response to that, in order to prove her wrong, he was so blinded about wanting to prove her wrong that he posted pictures of her house on Twitter.
I've heard this
Um,
story, and that's yeah. I don't know if that was a pro GG person or anti or a troll, but
that
like,
was a that
I
was a
wouldn't be
pro
surprised if it was a crazy person. Like that's
that was a prominent pro GG person and also a crazy person.
uh,
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a guy named Press Fart to continue.
okay. So you're talking
Um,
about way early in GamerGate. Then you're talking like first
yeah,
few.
that was
Yeah,
yeah,
because he he ended up later on getting basically kicked out like within the
yeah.
first few months because of Total Biscuit condemned him, and then so did pretty much everybody on Kotaku in Action and Twitter.
Oh yeah, yeah. the
Not
damage
over.
is done
Yeah, but yes.
when you have a pro GamerGate person saying, "Oh no, here's a picture of Brianna Wu's house,"
Yeah.
then boom, that's it. There's nothing else matters after that, because you have the press can say, "Well, a GamerGate supporter is posting a picture of her house." So
Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
I should probably go ahead. I'll let you.
no, I was just saying there were, you know, of course, when you get a movement this big with, hundreds of thousands of people in it, you're going to have morons.
Yeah.
And uh, that's part of the problem of being an anonymous movement, which, again, that's an interesting aspect of Gamergate is being, insistence on being an anonymous movement. Uh, Unfortunately, you're going to get things attributed to you that, overall, the group doesn't support, but, you know,
Yeah.
oh well.
And I should probably qualify too, because I actually did end up talking with this person, this press fire to continue person. I don't think that they were especially prominent. I think in Gamergate at all. I mean, they were only involved for like a few weeks.
He did stuff with Milo. I think he did a lot of research.
Well, he ended
Uh,
up maybe in the again like the first few weeks though. When this one thing went on for years, I don't think it's. But yeah,
yeah,
he was involved. He did reach out to me when he found out I was doing this project. Actually, he says that he was a dumb kid in high school at the time. That's what he says, and that he made some mistakes. He's not that person anymore. He just got a little carried away with stuff. That's what he says. I don't know if it's true, but
yeah. Well, there were other dumb people. There was the guy who went down to Randy Harper's place of work and took a picture.
yeah, I've not heard this story.
Um,
I can't verify this, but do you have sources on it?
yeah, well, I don't have the picture, but I'm sure I could find it. But yes, there was a guy who, he didn't threaten her, I don't think, but he did, hey, this is where she works. Here's a picture in front of her. That's, I don't know if anything was ever heard from him again with
Yeah, I
Gamergate.
I don't know
But
if this
again,
is again. I've never I know almost everything about GamerGate, as sad as it is to say, and this story's never come up. So if you have
yeah,
archives, I'm happy to see them.
I'll have to take a look.
Okay. I'm not saying
But
it didn't happen.
there are,
Obviously, there were
yeah,
tens of
there are other
thousands of
dumb people.
people involved in the
Yeah.
conversation, but it seems like
Uh,
that would be a story I would have heard.
yeah. Well, there are also things like the FBI report, which was interesting. Um, People want to argue that the FBI report showed that there is no harassment that came from Gamergate, but that's not true. Uh, it showed that the FBI actually went to one house, this kid's house. He was a minor at the time, anyway, and he had called Brianna Wu. I think it was. I don't think it said who, but I think it was pretty obvious that it was Brianna Wu. He had called her, I don't know, 40 times or whatever. But because he's a minor, yeah, and it was a minor calling somebody 40 times. And when the FBI comes and tells him to stop, then the kid stopped.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
you know, but
how did well are we see here's like part of the problem. Like are we saying that like every time like some 14-year-old kid on the internet decides that they're going to, fuck with some random internet celebrity that it's Gamergate? Or is this like
well,
a proven Gamergate person?
um, that came from Gamergate, or that what the argument that I make is that if there's no Gamergate, that doesn't happen. So what I like to say is that there was harassment that came from Gamergate. There were clearly some supporters of Gamergate, went too far here and there, but the Gamergate itself, not not really the people, but the movement created an environment where things got messed up. Uh, the harassment on both sides definitely received it. All sides received it. Not even both sides, but even the people who were in the middle of things.
So
So
good.
yeah, you can't blame every person who took part in Gamergate for harassment. But you can say that, well, Gamergate was at least a breeding ground for harassment, and whether or not you want to make the argument that, oh, so that means that anyone who supported Gamergate was responsible for, I don't believe that, but I think you know there are a lot of people in Gamergate who can't, they just don't have that within themselves to acknowledge that there was some stupid people in Gamergate who did what at least some would consider harassment.
Oh yeah, no, I don't deny
At the
that
very,
at all.
yeah.
Though it's the definition here where it's like, well, if Gamergate didn't happen, this person might not have received harassment, or maybe they would have. Who knows, right? But like we're just so therefore it's harassment from Gamergate, which I don't think is like a good definition at all, especially since like there were so many. I'm interviewing third-party trolls too as part of this project, and
Mhm,
I'm interviewing Avius. He's a guy. He says he was 14 years old during Gamergate during the first year released, and he and his friends they didn't even know what Gamergate was. They were literally
mhm,
just anti-social justice warriors who
yep,
wanted to fuck with people on the internet because they thought it would be funny. And so they would
yep,
send all sorts of harassing messages and gore porn and all this stuff
yep.
at people, including anti-Gamergate people. They didn't even know who these people were. They didn't know, so they didn't even know what Gamergate was. They said, "Yeah, I didn't know about Gamergate until years later."
Oh
So
yeah,
like, how
yeah.
are we like? But like under your definition, it's like, oh well, this guy's a Gamergate person, or at least like he's from Gamergate. The harassment's coming from Gamergate when we know objectively like that's not true, and he even admits that.
No, not under my definition. I would say definitely harassment came from third party sources, something awful, as I said. A lot of that came from trolls who all they wanted to do was screw around with Gamergate. But what I'm trying to say is not on if you look at things on an individual level, it's hard to say, you know, you can't really put a blame on harassment. You can't you can't really say, oh, Gamergate is a harassment campaign uh, because of that. Because obviously most people in Gamergate did not engage in harassment. But I think it would have better served people in Gamergate who support Gamergate if they had acknowledged that, if they had publicly come out. And of course, everyone did sign on to that. There's that one thing that GIF where it said, "I don't support harassment" and everything. So, almost everyone in Gamergate spoke out against harassment. But then when you do have harassment that happened as a result of Gamergate, I think it, it probably would have been better PR for Gamergate to say, you know what, some people have done some stupid shit. Uh, they did not do it on our behalf. We don't condone that. We hope they go to hell, whatever. And
Well,
of course, some people did. Some people did
I
do
mean,
that.
I wouldn't even say some people. I mean, I think that was like super hardcore mainstream in GG. Like, there's a reason that
Well,
Press Fart to Continue ended up getting condemned. There's a reason that Roguestar did. There's a reason that when Felicia Day was
oh,
doxxed by a troll, a third-party troll, it looks like we were 1,000% condemning that. There's a reason that when Brianna Wu was receiving death threats, she was receiving death threats from someone I'm interviewing, actually, Pterodax, a third-party troll, who also allegedly he claims that he doxed Acid Man, or that he has Acid Man's dox at least. So he went after pro
mhm,
Gamergate people too and harassed them as well, including someone else who I'm interviewing.
mhm.
Um, I just have an issue with the framing of like from Gamergate because like it seems like Gamergate's like a movement, and then at the same
Mhm.
time like you're like saying, well, anything that happens like in this time period is like Gamergate. That's what it feels like because you're saying the harassment's like from Gamergate.
Well, I'd say from the entire. You can even say it's from anti-Gamergate, but anti-Gamergate is necessarily tied to Gamergate. So would would we know who Brianna Wu is today if it weren't for Gamergate? No, I don't think so. God, I
Well,
hope not.
I mean, I mean, the Kiwi Farms people are obsessed with her. Like maybe that would have happened either way. We have no
Yeah.
idea, right?
No, that happened because of GamerGate. No one would care. I mean, she was making, this crappy Mac game, that she's only at all relevant today because of GamerGate, and she knows it too. Um, because she pretty much, for the past 10 years has skated by on saying GamerGate, GamerGate, GamerGate. Um, so uh, I'm not blaming GamerGate for creating Brianna Wu. I'm saying GamerGate is like this nebula cloud in space where it's creating stars, and Brianna Wu is one of them. Uh, it's not responsible for her, but unfortunately, she was one of the results of GamerGate.
All right. What did you think of the anti-harassment patrol that we did?
I thought that was good. Um, I know you guys got the what's that guy from Brazil that
I don't know his
he
name, but yeah, he was harassing Anita Sarkeesian,
yeah
and
yeah
he didn't even know
uh,
what Gamergay was. He's just a rando dude.
yeah yeah he's a typical troll and I think Gamergate needed more people. I think it needed more promotion of that, to get that kind of thing out. But it's really hard to do that because you have to. It really would have helped to. Well, I know Gamergate would never have had a leader, but that's part of the problem with Gamergate was that it didn't have a cohesive, easy message to convey. So that really cost Gamergate on the PR front. But I thought that was good PR for Gamergate. I saw that, and other people saw that, but uh, it's so difficult to break through with. You have all these journalists, of course, who were against Gamergate with every fiber of their being. That you needed more of that to really break through with your message.
Yeah, I should probably qualify that statement. I don't know if he knew what Gamergate was or not, but he wasn't a supporter of it. Whereas like
Right?
Avius had no idea.
Yeah, yeah. I knew it was just some guy just taking advantage of the situation in order to be stupid, which most of the that probably accounts for 99% of the crap that you saw during Gamergate.
All right, so aside from Randy Harper, how did your other interactions with anti-Gamergate people go?
Well, Zoe Quinn's got me blocked. Um, let's see. Uh, yeah, Zoe Quinn. It's funny because I was interviewed by a Marie Claire uh, writer, and that was a very interesting interview. And so I talked to her about all this stuff, and she had asked me, said, why would Zoe Quinn not just log off? And said, well, according to Zoe Quinn, she had talked about that. She said she can't just log off. It's on being online is her that's her whole game. She's a game developer and she needs to be online to talk to people. So she can't. I mean, she can't be offline. And the reason I know that reporter talked to Zoe after that, and I know that because Zoe um, tweeted right after that about being asked that question of why not logging off, why not just logging off, and she said, it's harassment to talk to me about that and stuff. So she must have blown up at that reporter, and the reporter buried that story. Then she didn't run with that story. Oh, well, that's an interview that I did that It doesn't matter. Thanks, Zoe. But of course, now Zoe has not been on Twitter for the past year. So I guess she no longer needs to be online
Well, I don't
as
to be.
much.
I think it's fair on her part to be like, well, look, I'm a game developer. I have to like market my game. I've got to like meet with other or DM journalists to get my story out there about the game. Like I think that's a reasonable thing. It is part of like her career. Like just like me operating on Twitter with like the book is.
Hmm.
I think that
Yeah.
that's like I think that that is like a valid thing. Though as a general matter, if you're being trolled, it's probably and she was being trolled by people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a general matter to like take like a week off or like at
Yeah.
the very least ignore it. Ignore it.
Yeah. Go
If
protected
yeah,
for.
like that's what I did,
Yeah.
and like that's what you do if you don't want these people to fuck with you for the rest of your life. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, she decided that she wanted to fight back, and like that's whatever. That's her choice. She can do whatever the fuck she wants. It's her life. And but by going to war with the trolls, not even GamerGate people, but like just trolls, um, it brought a lot of extra attention to it
Yep.
that was
But it
not productive
also.
for. Well, I guess she made a lot of money off it, so I guess it was productive in that sense.
Yes. Yeah.
But but it wasn't productive if you'd want the trolls to go away.
Right. Right. But yeah, as you said, there was a whole lot of money in there for if you became popular as a result of Gamergate. A lot of people made a whole lot of money on it. I mean, a whole lot of money on both sides too.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, yeah. But yeah, I did not have. Well, Zoe Quinn, I thought was for the most part. I don't. I don't know. I mean, how do you handle all of Twitter coming at you? What must have felt like all of Twitter coming at you. And of course, she had video of her when everything blew up, and she was at a bar, and her phone just kept ringing and ringing and ringing, and she answered some of these people and stuff like that. And, uh, but she didn't handle things all that great either. uh,
Yeah, you got to be kind of careful because otherwise people are going to think you're like victim blaming.
yeah,
When I'm
of
like, I
course.
think I've been very clear. Like, I don't support harassment. Like, even if like you respond to it very badly, I don't think that like justifies people being a dick to you.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. But well, I mean, especially in the latter years, she didn't handle very well. Running her Kickstarter, where uh, she was going to produce a game, and she wound up with what $180,000, I think, of people's money, and didn't have a game to show for it.
Yeah, and she was making,
Uh,
I think, tens of thousands at least. And Brianna Wu was making over $100,000 for a while, and a month in
yeah,
donations
yeah,
too. So
um,
a lot of
yeah,
money needed to be
and
made on both sides.
yeah, yep. And said, of course, Candace Owens made money for the most part. Gamergate made Milo's career until until that went tits up.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Sargon, of course, has made a whole lot of money. Um, you know, so there's a lot of
Oh yeah, there
money.
were hundreds of YouTubers covering this stuff, maybe
Oh yeah,
thousands. So
yeah. Yeah. Hell, I made some money.
I made some money too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I didn't make much, so I'll tell you
Yeah, not
that.
I didn't make Sargon levels of money.
No, no, nowhere close.
All right. Do you have any thoughts on Not Your Shield? Are you familiar with this?
Yep, yep. I thought that was the most effective part of Gamergate. That's what I'm talking about with the PR. Is Gamergate took its time, and uh, it Gamergate was very good at creating kind of media, gifs or memes or videos even. Some of them were brilliant, and some artwork, of course. Um, and Not Your Shield, where there was a video for Not Your Shield, wasn't there? With a bunch of
Several
uh,
several videos, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I thought that was by far the most effective thing that GamerGate did to in order to win, the hearts and minds of other people. Uh, it wasn't quite, enough to get people to understand the cause of GamerGate. The people that they would want to, uh, but it was, you know, very effective, very
Yeah,
interesting.
you may have noticed I'm not providing a lot of context for the things I'm bringing up, but that's because this is interview number like 24 or 5 out of.
Sure.
So in the book, the way it's the interviews reference other interviews throughout, and so I'm also gonna have a glossary too to define terms as well. So that's the plan
Hmm.
at least.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
supposed to be
Not Your
like
Shield is definitely a big part.
if you read the full, if you read the book from start to finish, it's gonna have like you'll already know the context of Not Your Shield by the time we get to your interview.
Oh, okay.
Why do you
Um,
think? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Why do you think some websites like 4chan, Reddit, NeoGAF, and others ban discussion of Gamergate?
Um, they just didn't want to deal with the mess for the most part. Um, well, I think 4chan did originally because uh, wasn't Zoe friends with Pool or something? Uh,
There's so many different stories. I don't know.
yeah,
That's what I
that
think.
was
Was Zoe was friends with the Reddit moderators. That's what I was told on our gaming.
yeah, yeah. Of
But
course, those were exactly what you would do if you wanted to create Gamergate. I mean, you couldn't do anything that was added more fire to the more fuel to the fire than Reddit, eliminating what was it, 20,000 messages or something, and
yeah, it was some insane number. I don't have the exact number in front of me.
yeah, and 4chan stopping. That's how you create Gamergate is Reddit doing what it did and 4chan doing what it did.
Well, I've interviewed the board owner of V from 8chan, and
Hmm.
I think it was him or it was Thydrin. One of them said that they actually believed that 4chan censored it because they got tired of it. I think it was
Hmm.
Thydrin who said that because basically people were just talking about it nonstop, and also there were someone created um, like a bot that would auto report every single GamerGate
Oh
post.
God.
That's
Oh
what that,
God.
and so the moderators
Yeah.
got flooded with like thousands of reports
Yeah.
every day. That's what they said. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. It's understandable, but yeah, that's how you create Gamergate is just shutting. People wanted to talk about the situation because even if you say that there was no what was the Jimquisition video that sex for reviews, uh,
Well,
even
to
if
be
there
clear,
that
like not sex for reviews. It was you're talking about the Internet Aristocrat video,
yeah, but
but he
that's
said sex
the
for favors,
okay, that
not
yeah,
sex for
that was the
reviews.
intro. Yeah. um it was a juicy topic and people wanted to talk about it and they couldn't all of a sudden, and the media wasn't covering it because the media was intentionally not covering it. And so where do they go? They go to Reddit to talk about it. They go to 4chan to talk about it. They want to talk about it. And oh, it's shut down. They can't talk about it on Reddit or 4chan. So this really juicy story is out there and there's nowhere to discuss it. So of course it blew up. Of course people blew up. I mean, that's exactly what would happen in that situation. So I think if there's any lesson you can get from Gamergate, I think it's to not do that, to do what they did, and to then come out with articles attacking people for wanting to talk about what you're not letting them talk about.
Why do you think some people claimed that Gamergate was about harassment or hating women?
Um, because that's the easiest way, and it was a very effective way of countering GamerGate. Um, and I'm sure that these people thought that that was true, that it was about hating women. But if you, as I said before, if you want to present your side, you want to present the other side as evil, and that way you don't even have to talk about any of their arguments. So that's the way. That's how media portrayed it, so that media didn't have to deal with any of the specifics with ethics in journalism. Uh, so they could just portray, hey, these are misogynists that are harassing women. That makes a good story. Ethics in game journalism is frankly not a great story. It's not. It's not something a lot of people want to read about. But a woman overcoming harassment, and hatred in order and persevering through that, that's a human interest story right there. So yeah, they framed the argument, in a pretty easy way, of misogyny and sexism, and that way they didn't really have to deal with it very much, to deal with the specifics anyway.
Well, do you think that the burgers and fries stuff leading up to
Wait one
Gamergate was
second, I think I
sexist?
lost you.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay,
Okay.
yep,
All right. Do you
I
think
got
that
you
the
now.
the burgers and fries stuff leading up to Gamergate, do you think that that was sexist?
um yeah, a little bit anyway, at least a little bit. uh would it have been interesting if it was a guy who was Zoe Quinn, who slept for reviews or whatever, allegedly. Um,
Well, not reviews. No one's saying reviews, right? We're
no,
saying
yeah, I know, I
it's
understand it,
positive coverage of.
but that was the
No,
the
that was not the
whole.
original claim. That's something that
I
Stephen
know that. I'm
Totillo
not saying
said.
that was the original.
Stephen
I'm not
Totillo
saying that's the
lied.
original
Okay,
claim.
I just want to clarify. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the original claim. I'm saying that that's how it was framed, um, in the start anyway. Uh,
No, not no no no. The word review. I mean, maybe someone out there was careless and said that, but the like no. The word review
well, no,
that
that's.
mostly comes from Stephen Totillo
Yeah,
and
I'm
his.
saying that's what people were looking into. Did sex for reviews happen? And uh, they were speculating on it. I
No, no,
know,
he said sex for favors in the video, the Internet Aristocrat video, and there's
right? I
no
know.
there's no talk about. I mean, I'd have to go back and rewatch like all 6 hours or whatever, but it's the
Well,
thing
no,
people
I'm
were
not
talking
talking
about
about
was
Jim's
saying
video.
right,
Yeah, I'm not talking
but
about Jim's
people aren't
video, but
saying
I'm
reviews
saying,
though. They're talking about positive coverage that can take many different forms. Review could be one form, but so could the actual de facto thing that actually happened, which was
yeah, but
49
to this
promoting her
day
game
you
over
have
49 other articles.
to this day you have people who say that Zoe Quinn had sex for reviews.
Well, maybe people
So
are
that's
misinformed, but
right. They were misinformed at the beginning too. Is what I'm
perhaps.
saying. It's people were looking into whether this was true or not. So that's kind of the allegation. People, oh, and then they read the thing, and then you see, okay, sex, whatever. Um, I don't think that part's all that.
Well,
Well, I'm not going to say
the
that's not.
reason
But
it's relevant is that this became the lie heard around the world, the review thing, and that's
yeah,
because of Stephen Totillo. Because Stephen Totillo said, "Well, Nathan Grayson never reviewed her game, therefore there's nothing wrong." Essentially, that's what Stephen
mhm,
Totillo, the editor in chief of Kotaku, had said. Um,
yeah,
which was then repeated by thousands and thousands and thousands of journalists, quote unquote, writing articles about Gamergate for hundreds of different publications
yeah,
all over the world. Because Stephen Totillo said, well, there's no review, therefore there could be nothing unethical here. Even though there were very real ethical violations, just not in the form of a review.
yes, correct.
Or actually, there was an ethical violation, perhaps, in the form of a review with Nathan Grayson and Robin Arnott and the review of Sound Self, which was uncovered
Oh,
at the time, but that's
yeah,
a separate thing. And there
yeah,
was also a review, and again, prior to the Gamers Are Dead articles, there was also a review of Gone Home by Danielle Reindow, who was friends with the composer of the music for the game, and that was
yeah. Oh,
undisclosed. So there were like maybe
there's a
people are
ton of
mixing up
actual
multiple different
ethical
things that were
violations.
uncovered in a
Yeah.
2 week period. But
What I'm saying is it was a salacious, juicy story that people wanted to know more about.
do you have any thoughts on the studies done on Gamergate and harassment, such as the Women Action Media study or the Brand Watch study?
For the most part, they are all crap.
Have you looked into them at all?
I don't recognize them offhand, but I know that um, a lot of what I have seen, they are qualitative studies. So there are people that look at things like they look at words that are used on Kotaku in action, and they see a lot of swear words. So they think, you know,
I've not
uh,
seen. Yeah, I've not seen that study. These two studies in particular show that Gamergate's not a harassment campaign, actually. Um,
oh, okay.
yeah, these they look at Twitter. I can get you the exact methodology and stuff if you want to go through it all. But they looked at Twitter. One of them looked at it from October to November. No, September to October, I believe. And the other one looked at
Hmm.
it from the. Well, they used two different methodologies. One of which was looking at the GamerGate hashtag with a random sampling of 1/4 of the tweets out of over 2 million tweets at the
Hmm.
time, and that analysis found that 1.26% of the tweets contain negative sentiment, not harassment, but negative
Hmm.
sentiment towards Brianna Wu, Leigh Alexander, Anita Sarkeesian, or Zoe Quinn. And then the other study looked at the GamerGate auto blocker actually, and it used
Oh.
that to determine who was a supporter of GamerGate, and it found that 0.66% of the accounts associated with the block list during this period of GamerGate had engaged in harassment
Hmm.
or
I think I
received
remember
or
that.
were reported as having engaged in harassment.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think any of those content where you have a scraper looking at content, um, I have a little problem with those. Those, whether those are accurate or not. Uh, I mm, yeah, personally, I'm not a big fan of those kinds of that kind of research. I like well, personally, I like talking to people. That's what I do with my surveys. Um, so I'm not sure how much faith I would have in those. I probably wouldn't have very much.
Well, I don't.
Um,
The brand
but I would
watch
say
one.
they are
Good.
probably helpful.
Yeah.
It's always helpful to have at least something out there.
I feel like the Women Action Media one's actually really good data because we have the full methodology for it. We have the whole study. It's all publicly available information, and it seems like it's
Mhm.
pretty solid. The Brand Watch slash Newsweek study, though, they never released the data. They only released little snippets of it, so we don't
Yeah,
have everything.
yeah, yeah. A lot of times you're not going to get the data from these, from Newsweek or Time or anything like that.
Do you think most
Yeah.
Gamergate people? Go ahead.
No, well, I was going to say if you can't get the data from them, then you can ignore them.
Yeah. Well, it's they thought it was good data, so and it's a pretty. I think it's pretty good stuff, especially in combination with the other study, which very similar findings.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't bet the farm on that. Whereas I think the Women Action Media one actually is pretty solid data.
Yeah.
Do you think most Gamergate people did a good job condemning harassment?
I think it did probably about as well as it could have. As I said, there were definitely places where the PR in GamerGate was lacking, but I don't know. how GamerGate could have done better PR, other than having a leader who's able to come up uh, with a distinct message that the media could actually get a hold of and run with. Uh, as an anonymous movement, uh, I think GamerGate's messaging was of course all over the place, but at least as an impartial, hopefully, observer, I could see and I know that by and large, the people of GamerGate were against harassment. They didn't want people harassed. They wanted to talk about GamerGate, and they wanted to get their opinions heard.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. What do you think of the leaderless and decentralized and anonymous or semi-anonymous nature of GamerGate as a
I
movement?
thought that was really interesting. I thought it was actually kind of cool that uh, it was the insistence on being leaderless. I mean, uh, it was seriously leaderless. Anyone who tried to argue for leadership was shot down hard, um, which was always fun to watch. I know early on there was like some lawyer who or someone who wanted their girlfriend or wife or whatever to be a lawyer and look into things, and people found out that I don't know. Anyway, they went after her. Um, it was very interesting, and it was a double-edged sword. Of course, GamerGate did that because they don't want anyone coming after them. Coming after a leader who is fallible, and that in that sense, it's effective. But at the price that they paid was that their messaging didn't get through as well as it might have otherwise.
All right. You said you don't have to talk about it, but you mentioned earlier that you received something that you received quote unquote harassment. You want to talk about that?
Um, Not so much. I mean, I've had you know people sending me highly inappropriate pictures and uh, animals defecated in this, you know, um, and other pictures. But nothing I can't handle. I received crap from something awful people as well, and anti Gamergate. I had one guy who he says he's a like an indie developer, and so he doxed me and said he was going to come to my hometown, and he said he did that because he wanted to show me what Anita Sarkeesian felt. So
Okay.
that
That's kind
that's
of
such
that's that's
I
kind of
don't know.
crazy.
Yeah, that I don't know if it's worse to me that he's like, I'm going to come to your hometown because I've looked you up, or if his saying that he's sending that to me because of Anita Sarkeesian. He wants me to know how she feels. I think that's even crazier. So, um, yeah, again, it's not something I take really seriously, but when you receive that kind of stuff, it sucks that you have to deal with it. But whatever. I've been on the internet a long time, so
Well, do you have any thoughts? Do you remember the Zack Attack incident?
yes, I do. Um, yeah, I reported on that. Yeah, Mombot, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I did like I talked to Mombot about that. Yeah, where they that have you explained to people what about that incident yet, or
In great detail.
okay?
we,
Yeah,
but
that.
we can do it again if you want. You know.
And I mean, you just had what I think originally about 14 or so people form a Twitter group to talk about outing Mamba as what American or something as a white guy and
as a white male. And
yeah, not a Japanese woman.
yeah, and
Uh,
they created like a whole fake like Facebook profile and breadcrumbs, and Thunder
yeah,
House was infiltrating the community, and yeah,
yeah, that was that was entertaining to say the least.
yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Well, why do you think that the media only talked about the harassment that anti-GamerGate people received?
because it's a whole lot easier to for the messaging. Um, the narrative is a whole lot easier for anti-Gamergate than it was for pro-Gamergate. It's a whole lot easier to say, we got a mob wanting to break down the door because they're angry about this and we're trying to persevere through this than it is to say, oh hey, we want ethics in game journalism and we're not actually harassing people, but we do want to say this and this and this about the this thing that for the most part people outside of gaming don't care about. They don't care about ethics in game journalism.
I will provide a little bit of context for this next one since we don't talk about it super often. But a small number of GamerGate people broke away from the mainstream movement and formed their own board and community called GG Revolt. Do you have any thoughts on that? Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, and I don't really. I mean, anytime you have a number of people as large as GamerGate, you're going to have something like that.
And we touched upon this a little bit too, but what do you think of sea lioning?
Oh yeah, I think it's actually true. There was sea lioning. There's a lot of people. You know, if anyone outside of GamerGate came out and said, uh, hey, what is GamerGate? They would just get flooded with you know people talking and talking and talking and talking. With my survey, uh, I had some open-ended questions, so people could write what they want, but I would say, be brief. And I had at least one guy with, I think it was 2,000 words on one answer. So,
That might have been me. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not.
well, so people would. Uh, that's just another. People wanted to be heard, and so they were excited. And when somebody would hopefully listen to them, and so they wanted to get everything out. So yeah, I think sea lioning was kind of a thing. Not just with Gamergate though, with all the sides that were, it was very easy to be just inundated with way too much information.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I said something kind of dumb earlier, Brad.
Hmm.
Well, you have to be more specific. Which dumb thing did I say that am I referring to specifically?
Sure.
The dumb thing that I said that I'm referring to specifically is that I feel I know almost all there is to know about Gamergate. But honestly, at this point, I feel like, gosh, I think that might be true.
Yeah,
And
because I mean,
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want to be open to new information. I want to be, but today, this is like the first day I feel this way, I guess. But it's like, is there anything left to figure out? And I don't know if there is.
um, not really. What's left is, I think, messaging. Yeah, hopefully getting, as I said, getting the message through to people about what really, not necessarily what really happened, but what people wanted to happen. What it was it about? I think maybe in time, some people will be able to listen and see. But of course, you're going to have a whole lot of people just happy enough to consider GamerGate a hate campaign of harassment, and you know they're perfectly happy in their world thinking that. So
Yeah,
you're not going to get really through to them.
when I started this project, like part of me was like, well, Um, I spent several weeks thinking about what I want to do with this, if anything,
Hmm.
and I've continued to think about it since. And when I started, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna like put the factual information out there, the truth, and do like an encyclopedia, and like set the record
Hmm.
straight, more or less, on this stuff with an encyclopedia. And then I'm like, no, actually, I don't want to do that because I don't spend the next 10 years of my life doing this.
Uh-huh.
I've already written one
Uh-huh.
book on the subject. This is my second
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, no, I'll just do a compendium of interviews and I'll tell people stories. And then I'm like, well, as I do this, I'll be investigating Gamergate on my own. So I'll be like learning more about it. I'll be like, I'll uncover the truth about Gamergate. I was kind of like thinking to myself. And then like I feel like I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I've I've learned I feel like the truth is that Gamergate was a lot of different things to a lot of different people,
Yep.
and that's the truth. Like that's the truth. But like I also but like the media fucked this shit up so bad. Like the
Oh,
idea
horrible.
like it wasn't a harassment campaign. Like whatever it was, it definitely wasn't a harassment campaign.
It if it were, you know,
Typically a harassment campaign, it could have been a whole lot more effective in harassing people.
Yeah. Well, I guess
Oh,
now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, my earbuds have died.
Oh, you're fine. You're coming through clear now. Actually,
Oh, can you hear your voice?
I know I cannot.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just yeah. I have another 25 interviews to go roughly,
Oh my
and
god.
I when I started the project, I wanted to do like 20 people, and then
Oh, yeah,
everybody reaches out to me, and then I realize, well, here's an aspect of the story I haven't covered yet, and so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's so hard to get organized with Gamergate. How do you even write one book? Where do you start? I started when I was starting my book. I started with gaming back in with the gaming websites. Well, I started this interview with the same gaming, like Old Man Murray. The websites that were available in the mid '90s about gaming, where because you really have to understand gamer culture in order to understand Gamergate. And not a lot of people actually understand gamer culture. They don't understand that it is a culture, and there's a whole thing that with gamers, and there's a way to, of course, Lee Alexander thinks that the culture is consumerism, and it might be a little bit anyway, but that's not all it is, and so how do you get people to understand Gamergate when they have to understand so much? It's not really easy to convey.
yeah. My first book on it, which was like more of like a traditional book on it.
Hmm.
I start with just different perspectives on Gamergate. Like, so you're jumping in as a reader, and I go into like, here's all these different views that people have on this, and you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers.
Hmm.
Um, so I sort of explore it initially from like that lens.
Yeah.
You know? And I wrote that book in like 2 months,
Wow.
maybe less,
Nice.
and I have over 200 sources in it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a project.
yeah. It was just every day after work, just
Yeah, I was
working
just
on it.
looking at the folder that I haven't looked at the folder in quite a while, and oh my god, there's so much stuff in this folder that I have.
Oh,
Of course,
it's
the data, collecting all the data and everything, it's all there. But yeah, it's a lot.
yeah, it's almost too much. Which is like maybe why this was so hard to explain to people.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It yeah, not something that is easy to get across. And it's not if it's not easy to get across to somebody, then the media is really not going to pick it up because the media needs something in easy little tiny bites so that they can spit it back out real quick.
All right. Speaking of the media, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think about how they covered GamerGate?
Awful, horrible. Uh, as I've told some of them, and many of them have blocked me for saying this, but they covered GamerGate in exactly the way that you would want them to cover it if they wanted GamerGate to blow up. Uh, I mean, they could not have done a better job of pouring fuel on the fire. It it was just atrocious. Yeah, as I said, if GamerGaters had felt heard very quickly, there would have been no GamerGate. There would have been, this harassment and all that stuff that, all that would have gone away. But they didn't. They wanted to be activists and they wanted to make change, and so they did not cover it objectively in any way whatsoever. And they even said, Jason Schreier said, we will never ever be objective. That's not something we want to be. So, well, okay, well, here are the consequences of your actions. There's GamerGate for you.
Well, obviously you did a study on this, pretty comprehensive one it looks like, and you also wrote about it extensively. Did other people reach out to you, like the New York Times or Washington Post or Wall Street Journal or anybody?
Well, as I said earlier, I had Marie Claire. They were going to do an article on it, but that article got buried. I've been interviewed by a couple places, but never like never New York Times or Washington Post or people that really should have reached out to me. Yeah, I had Motherboard, who I've written for Motherboard. Motherboard's part of Vice. They reached out to me about my survey before it was published in the paper, and so he did a little interview with me, and I told them all about it, and they didn't print a word that I said, and instead they spoke with somebody else. What's her name? I forget her name. She was part of Anti-Gamergate, and she was a friend of Anita Sarkeesian's. And
Catherine Cross?
um, was it Catherine Cross? Yeah, I believe so.
We both know
Yeah,
way too much
yep,
about this stuff.
yep, Catherine Cross. Yep. So she's been working on her. She's got it in her Twitter bio. She's been working on her PhD since before GamerGate. So that's almost 10 years now. Jeez. Anyway, they interviewed her, and she said, "Oh, she dismissed it as some random poll that I took." And so they printed her comments in that article, but not mine.
That's wild.
Yeah, but that's Vice, and the guy who did that interview, he would become the leader, the editor in chief of Motherboard, and then, of course, now they fired him.
Oh, that's good at
So,
least.
yeah, yeah, the media is just
Too bad they never corrected his article.
no, no. But the media is just not at all. The modern media is not equipped to deal with something like Gamergate.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, there were. I always say there were about 5 people total that wrote competently about Gamergate. David Auerbach, Kathy Young. I think there was one not bad article from the Washington Post. I forget who wrote that.
Was it the Washington Post or the Washington Examiner?
I think it was the Post.
Okay.
I think
Well,
there was an early-ish article, kind of like an explainer, and I think it was mostly objective, not perfect or anything, but I think it was, it's about as good as you're going to get from the mainstream. And then of course Eric Kane, but
Ezra
yeah, but
Klein
not
I
many.
thought did okay too.
Who?
Ezra Klein.
Oh,
But he didn't talk about it super much. He wrote like one article about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, for the most part, it's beyond media. They can't write a quick 800 words about it in 20 minutes. So
And who I think did the best job is Michael Koretsky, actually.
oh yeah, yeah. But he
SPJ
didn't write.
Airplay.
Yeah, he didn't write for any publication though, unfortunately.
No, but it was an act of journalism. I consider it. I consider this
Yeah,
book to be one too.
yeah, yeah. Koretsky's a good guy, and I'm not saying that just because he gave me a Kunkel Award.
I interviewed him already too. He's watching most of these interviews. He says.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
why couldn't they just like reach out to people? Because like it's it's not super hard to find GamerGate people. Like,
Who do they reach out to?
well, I mean, anybody would be like better than what they did, which was like nobody at all. Because
That's true.
you could go on the hashtag. Who's what are the top tweets? Um, you can go on Reddit. You can even go on 8chan like GG Revolt or GGHQ. I mean,
Hmm.
not Revolt. Don't go to Revolt. You'll get a certain story from Revolt, that's for sure, but it's not going to be a
Yeah,
good story.
yeah.
It's part of the story. I'm interviewing some of those Revolt people myself. I've already interviewed one.
Oh.
Um,
Well, that's part of the problem with being an anonymous movement is who represents the movement.
yeah. Well, hey, I mean, look, the GG Revolt person, you want to interview them? That's part of the story too. But also,
Yeah,
there were like 50 of those people
yeah. Now,
compared to like all the other communities that were much larger.
so would you have been happy with if somebody in the early days had gotten Roguestar and said, "Okay, Roguestar is a leader in the movement." One
I'd
of the
be,
leaders.
I'd be like, well, you shouldn't just reach out to one person.
Yeah,
I'd say,
yeah.
I'd say you probably have to reach out to like at least like three from like different segments of it, right?
Hmm. Yeah. You'd have to do some work, and that's not what journalists want to do.
Yeah. Did the media's coverage of GamerGate increase or decrease your trust in them?
Decrease. Big time. Yeah. It really yeah. Well, I never really had all that much trust in media anyway, but it really showed how lazy, especially any journalist who you see who on their Twitter bio you see they're like a tech culture writer. Uh, that basically means they're a blogger. Um, it was really laid laid bare in Gamergate how these people are a lot of them are just they don't really have any talent. I guess I should say that's kind of mean. Um, I don't know why they're writers because their writing is nothing special. They're not really. They're just producing content to click on. So it's you know it's empty calories.
Oh, there's a lot of that out there in the streamer
Hmm.
world too, in all sorts of all aspects of
Oh
life.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
social media is basically.
Yeah, that's true.
If a journalist who got GamerGate wrong in your eyes is reading this now, what do you want them to reconsider?
Their profession. Um,
I like that answer though. I do.
yeah, well, it's. I mean, pretty much any journalist should reconsider their profession because it's going to be all AI anyway soon. It's it's a it's a hard profession to make money in, especially. But what I would consider is whether they are happy as they are. Are they all of us writers when we're young and we want to make a difference. We want to stand out. We want to be we want to be big time. And uh, why write just an article that's just the same crap that everyone else writes. You know, stand out, be different, and that's kind of why I started getting into the GamerGate thing, is because I knew I could have a different angle on it. I could do something different from what every other journalist is doing. Uh, I mean, why else would I start writing about any topic if I don't feel that I can add something to it? So, you know, I understand you got to eat, but you also got to live with yourself and got to look at yourself in the mirror. So I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, not a bad answer. What do you think the media can learn about how they covered Gamergate?
Uh, huh. Well, I don't know if they have the ability to learn from how they covered Gamergate. Um, if they did have the ability, what could they learn is how not to cover an anonymous movement of angry people. Um, they need to get in there and do the work and talk to people and not just blindly present a movement, whether it's Gamergate or Black Lives Matter or anything, as some cohesive. Try to stay away from the narrative. I would hope the easy narrative. Everyone likes a story where you have, someone, a hero uh, meets an antagonist and comes out a hero. They come up on some hardships and they overcome the hardships, and that's the kind of story you want to tell. But that's not the truth most of the time. So I would encourage journalists to look at Gamergate, realize that you guys did not inform the public well about Gamergate. The journalists that covered it failed, for the most part, and the result of that is a whole lot of very angry people who will probably never trust media for the rest of their lives. So,
Have you seen the
as they
Gamer
say, do better.
Have you seen the Gamergate Wikipedia article?
Um, yes, kind of. I was mentioned in the background stuff where they talk about it, where people are saying that I wasn't. I hmm, I wasn't a good source or something. I
Oh, I'm
think.
sure. I'm sure they definitely said that because your pieces were more nuanced than anything that is mentioned in the article.
Yeah,
Trust me, like
yeah,
this was a whole battle. This was a whole battle for
yeah, yeah.
years.
Yeah,
Um,
Gamergate did teach me that about Wiki. I didn't really know that before Gamergate, about how bad it is at Wikipedia, where you know how manipulative it can be. I knew, I knew that Wikipedia, not everything is in there is perfectly right and all that, but I didn't know how political it was.
yeah, I'm gonna have to pull up Ryu Long's.
Oh yeah, he's the one
Uh,
that said that about me.
oh, he is. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
responsible for
I'm not a credible
20%.
source.
20% of all the edits to the article. He made 1,151 edits on the
Yep,
article's talk page too.
yep. I remember.
Yeah. He personally might be more responsible for the negative image of Gamergate than any other individual on earth potentially.
Yeah, yeah.
Cuz he was like a super user on Wikipedia
Hmm.
and had a lot of sway. And then of course the media were lazy and they just when they talk about Gamergate at all, which they do a lot still even,
Yeah,
they they just go on Wikipedia and say, "Oh, harassment campaign, okay."
yeah. That's the problem with Wikipedia and Gamergate, is that Wikipedia puts all this emphasis on trustable sources, credible sources. And so they believe the New York Times is a very credible source. Of course, uh, on GamerGate, no. The New York Times is not a credible source. But you can't really say that on Wikipedia because they rely so much on credible sources, and the credible sources on GamerGate aren't in the mainstream media. So when you keep the credible sources for GamerGate out of the mainstream media, that's how you come up with the Wikipedia and the mess that it is.
Wow, Ryu Long, not so woke of him in this tweet. Do you see this? I don't have time to deal with Gamergate fags here, considering I
Oh,
only checked Twitter to see if there was an update for a video game.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the people who are woke or social justice minded are former edgelords themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of like Ian Miles Chong. Ugh, that's a whole nother thing.
And well, hang on, I'm looking into this. So this is an allegation. Fuck, dude. This Encyclopedia Dramatic article on him is insane.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Here, have you seen the ED article? Well, I can't link it. I don't think because I'm not sure YouTube allows me to. I can link it on Discord.
yeah. Um, yeah, I saw the Encyclopedia Dramatica article.
Yeah.
That's again, I think they've talked about me as well, where I'm not credible, even though I'm peer reviewed and published.
Anyway, sorry. Back to the interview. Um, how important is it to you that the narrative on GamerGate change?
Um, Change now or
Yeah, now.
well, I don't think it's. It would be nice if we can look back at GamerGate more objectively than what we did. I don't know if we're going to get people who weren't involved in Gamergate to care.
Yeah, I think that might be the case because people who were involved in GamerGate on either side, a lot of those people are like super hardcore obsessed with this stuff.
Yeah.
But like the people who are like 20 years old now and were like fucking kids when they were not fucking kids, but when they were kids during GamerGate, they don't care
Yeah. Yeah.
mostly.
And how do you make them care? I don't see a way.
Yeah. I mean, should they care or does it not really matter?
Uh, yes and no. It would help them learn about the media. It would help them learn about the social justice left, I think. Um, because I think Gamergate was a part of the social justice left's becoming this big thing, or at least not saying Gamergate was at all responsible for it, but exposing it more or less. So I think they're understanding. I think Gamergate is a very interesting thing as far as online phenomena, but I don't think they currently have anything close to what they need in order to understand it. And I don't know how to make them look hard enough in order to care.
Yeah, I've it's something I'm struggling with too. Like, how important was this shit? Because like at the time, everybody like and I fucking like everybody, like the media, the pro Gamergate people, the anti Gamergate people, third party trolls, random
Yeah.
people on the internet, like everyone on YouTube had a fucking video on this shit. Like everybody was talking about this and thought it was the biggest deal in the world. And
Yeah.
then
Well.
like some people some people say like, oh my god, Gamergate caused like Trump and like the rise of fascism in America, and then like other people are like, actually it wasn't really that big of a deal, and other people say like it brought ethics to games journalism and improved the industry in considerable ways, and other people say that it changed localization practices for the better, and like it's like, but how important was this shit? I have no idea. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
You had a New York Times feature on their website where they even have a special graphic for it, where they published 4 op-eds, all collectively under the title of "Everything is Gamergate," or was it "Everything is Gamergate" or "Gamergate is Everything"? One of the two. So I mean, that was a New York Times feature saying everything. Well, let me look it up real quick.
I've heard of this one. I don't think I've read this one particularly. I don't
Yeah,
know
it was
everything about Gamergate.
one of the. One of them was Brianna Wu. Everything is Gamergate is the if you do a search
So,
for it.
did they have
Oh
any of them by pro Gamergate people or neutral people, or was it all just anti?
no, of course not.
Okay.
They had Charlie Warzel, who he was a reporter trying to understand it, and he had no chance, of course, and I don't think he even cared. Uh, then you have Brianna Wu with "I wish I could tell you it's gotten better. It hasn't."
I'm
Uh,
talking with Brianna Wu. I just talked to her like 2 days ago, actually.
just well,
She might be. I might be interviewing her.
a very
But
good
I'm not trying to
opportunity.
add more. I'm not trying to add new people to the project, really. But like, if she wants to do it, she can.
Yeah, and then you have
Obviously, she played a pretty big role, I guess, in
yeah,
some ways.
yeah. Uh,
Yes, I mean, yeah, I mean, she did play a big
yeah,
role.
then you have "First They Came for the Black Feminists." So, this is a Harvard lecturer who's trying to frame Gamergate uh, as a group of people coming for black feminists, which never
I've
happened.
never. I don't know if there was like even a single black feminist who like talked about Gamergate.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Like,
And then Sarah
maybe,
Jong, yeah.
maybe there were. It's millions of people talked about this probably. So like, maybe one person did, but I don't. Certainly didn't get harassed by Gamergate. I wouldn't say.
Yeah. Yeah. There was that reporter with Vox, AJ Romano. She has, at last I've counted, it was well over 40 articles mentioning Gamergate. I mean, that's over 40 articles
Yeah,
mentioning game. I mean,
that's
that's
and gee, I wonder what's in them.
yeah. Well, they're all
Yeah.
exactly what you would expect. I mean, she's one of the worst writers I've ever seen, and I've called her out many many times. But uh, yeah, she's made a living talking about Gamergate.
I'm not sure. As someone who supported the movement, um, I still don't know how important it was. I really don't. Like
Mhm.
I think we got some wins that I'm happy with. I don't think it caused Trump to get elected, nor would I be like proud of it if that were
No,
the case. So,
no. Well, yeah, people, uh, you know, people talk about Gamergate elected Trump, and Gamergate was the canary in the coal mine. I said, well, Hillary
well,
Clinton
and so
Hillary Clinton never went to Wisconsin to campaign, and
yeah,
she lost Wisconsin. So I say Gamergate didn't keep Hillary Clinton out of Wisconsin.
no,
you
that's
know,
true. Though Gamergate, I think that actually probably is true. Gamergate was the canary in the coal mine, but not for the reasons they think. Like the
Mhm.
fact is, like the left, like fucked this shit up so bad. I'm on the left. I'm a social democrat, neoliberal kind of person. I'm pretty left wing.
Mhm.
But they fucked this. Like the social justice left fucked this shit up so bad,
Yeah.
and is largely responsible for like the negative narrative about Gamergate, and also responsible for like a whole host of other issues like in our society.
Oh yeah, there's
Which, but with
there's a
like if
radical left that out there.
and they aren't interested like the main issue is like they don't have an interest in like engaging in discussion. They just want to shut down everyone who disagrees with them, and like
Yep.
that also that same phenomenon blew Gamergate up. Maybe it even created Gamergate, you could say.
Yep.
And that same phenomenon is also responsible for Trump getting elected. I think you could
Yep.
say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can argue that Trump getting elected is more of a screw you to the left than it is anything. Well, I think Trump getting elected is a screw you to everybody. Is basically why people voted for Trump.
True. But I think a big
So
part of that was that this segment of the left, which has a lot of political power, a lot of influence in
Mhm.
society, was so extraordinarily intolerant of anyone who could possibly disagree with them. And so they said, you know what? Fuck it. They're going to call us racist either way.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
burn it all down.
yeah. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people in GamerGate liked Trump, but not for his politics. They liked that Trump, is himself a shit poster.
Yeah, I mean,
He's a
I
troll,
don't know
and
if I'd say a lot of people in Gamergate liked Trump because there were some people in Gamergate who very much did, and some people in Gamergate who very much didn't.
I think, yeah, that's true. But I think a lot of people in GamerGate liked that he was stirring shit. You know, um, so that that's something that appeals somewhat to the anarchic nature of some of the people in Gamergate.
All right, we're nearing the end here, Brad.
Oh, thank God.
What's your favorite video game?
Um, that's a hard one. I'm gonna have to go with Half-Life or Half-Life 2, one of them.
Not a bad choice. I feel like Half-Life 2 actually is probably like one of the greatest single-player FPS games of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, both of them were.
I've played one, but I never beat it.
Yeah. Or it could be also Baldur's Gate 2 or Baldur's Gate. I always called it Baldur's Gate, but now, of course, with Baldur's Gate 3, everyone says Baldur's Gate, and so now, yeah.
Did you attend any Gamergate meetups?
No.
Did you make any friends with people during Gamergate on either side?
I guess you could say, uh, you know, internet friends-ish. Not, I'm not a very social person, so no one I talk to regularly or anything.
Do you have any thoughts on Vivian James or Gamergate related art projects?
Uh, Again, I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of Gamergate was the artwork. I thought that you could look you could write a whole book about just the propaganda that came out of Gamergate. The the um, the going to war posters, all those things. I think it was remarkable. I thought that was really interesting to see. Uh, one how Vivian came together, uh, and how quickly she was adopted, and how quickly uh, there were 3 billion different versions of Vivian, and then when Anti Gamergate came out with their blonde white version, um, it was
Well,
just amazing.
yeah, I have to say, because apparently the Lillian Woods art that was according to Miss Sonata, she gave me a link to some tweets. That was made by someone who was quote unquote neutral on Gamergate.
Oh,
Though
okay.
they had criticized Gamergate, um, but supposedly, according to Miss Sonata, they identified themselves as being neutral.
Okay.
But
But
that's what I
some of
was
that artwork
told.
is, it's real art. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, what was your favorite moment during Gamergate?
Oh God, I I have no idea. It's been so many years. Huh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a favorite moment. Probably when my article got published. Personally,
On Game
um,
Politics?
no, the paper got published in the journal. Um,
If you could have changed one thing about Gamergate, what would it be?
I wouldn't change anything. I mean, it's up to the people of Gamergate.
True, fair enough. What would you personally have done differently during Gamergate?
Um, if I were in control of the movement, or
No, as I guess in terms of how you interacted with it and its critics.
uh, I would not have promised my book. um,
You could still do it, you know.
Yes.
Even without Steve Bannon, I don't think he's even like that important.
Yeah, we'll see. uh, yeah, that's about it. I think I covered it pretty fairly. So I'm pretty happy with my interaction with GamerGate.
All right, what would sorry, about to repeat that. Let's say it's 10 years from now, and an online movement is looking to GamerGate for guidance for their movement. What advice do you have for them as an outsider?
Uh, I would say if they're going to look at it, they better look deep for you know because a whole lot of people say that they think that they know what the tactics of Gamergate are, and they're not right. But of course, some of the tactics won't be uh, repeatable anymore. Like it used to be that getting a topic on Twitter to trend was a really big deal. Uh, it's something that companies would pay $120,000 to get something put up on trending, and GamerGate was able to control trending for
Very much so. It
quite
was
a while.
great.
It was impressive. And that, I mean, if you think about it, Gamergate was able to get pretty much whatever they wanted to trend. I mean, that's, as I said, that's something a company would pay six figures in order to do. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So Gamergate had certain tactics, uh, but these aren't tactics that most people really know unless they really do their research into Gamergate.
Yeah. And we would make stuff trend over memes. Do you remember there was the real Pizzagate, not the crazy
Yeah,
QAnon shit,
yeah,
but the real Pizzagate was us.
yeah,
Because we created
absolutely.
a Pizzagate prior to the people hijacking that hashtag like years later and using it for their own nefarious ends. But
Yep, yep. The whole pineapple on pizza thing, and
yep. Is that a death threat?
yeah, well, yeah. Anyone who orders pineapple on pizza should have a death threat.
Brad Glasgow confirmed supporting harassment.
Yeah.
I disavow. I disavow. Um, what have you personally learned from GamerGate?
um, I my distrust in media has grown. My distrust of Wikipedia has exponentially grown. Um, my foray into game journalism was definitely a learning experience. um, and I've learned that it's a whole lot more profitable to be doing other things. Um, yeah, I guess
Uh,
that's it.
was GamerGate successful in your eyes as an outsider?
Yes, no.
Do you want to
Both.
elaborate?
Um, it was successful in some areas, not as successful in some areas.
What did they want?
What did the Gamergate supporters want?
Yeah.
Everything that they wanted.
I'm not gonna get a good answer on this.
No, there are again a million different answers to that one.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
A
So,
million different things.
what do you think of this interview project?
Um, I'm glad you're doing it and not me.
Yeah. Well, I feel like. Well, how do you think I've been so far? Have you seen the other ones or just this one?
Just this one.
Okay.
Because it's hard for me to get back into Gamergate after. Um, yeah, I think you've been doing good. You've been doing good.
Yeah. Thanks. I obviously I'm super biased in like the Pro GT side because of my history,
Oh,
but like I
yeah.
try to be really fair. Now I feel like this was like one of the worst interviews I've done. No offense. Not your fault, it's mine. I've been a
Oh, thanks.
disinterested a little bit
Oh,
because I got
thanks.
no, it's not you. I got real life stuff happening.
Oh,
My
you,
grandma
it's
passed away, and
oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's not your fault. So I've been like a little bit distracted over the past few days.
Yeah.
But also, like, I'm kind of like at this point where I'm like,
Are you
do
getting
I?
burned out?
No, no. I mean, this is a massive project. I better not be getting burned out. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've done this before because I've done it 20 times on voice over the past month.
Yeah.
Basically, like past 40 days, I've done 22 something interviews now, plus text interviews I've done with people, plus every day it's GamerGate. Every day it's I'm waking up and I'm like I
Yeah.
got to do research on this thing now after I get off work. It's like doing
Yeah.
research, doing this. You know, it's a little bit overwhelming. I think I need a
Yeah.
small little break for a couple days.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just
But
gonna say, take a break, do other things.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
so
I'm gonna change an answer. My favorite part of GamerGate is when I started doing other things. Like I started talking to Notch, who eventually blocked me, of course. But I did my interview with Notch, and I thought it was a great. I mean, it's a 9,000 word interview, uh, and it was a great experience because I mean, the man is just absolutely brilliant, and he gave a great interview. We really clicked. It was a great experience. Uh, and then I got posted to The Escapist because I was kind of able to get into a little bidding war with The Escapist and another publication, and The Escapist won. Um, and so that article got published, and Total Biscuit uh, tweeted about the article. He said that's a hell of an interview with Notch, and that I thought that was one of my favorite because I have a whole lot of respect for Total Biscuit. May he rest in peace. Um, and so I thought that was one of my favorite moments.
yeah, everyone loves TB. Sadly, I never got a chance to interact with them personally.
Yeah. I didn't interact with him personally either. I don't even know if he knew my name at all. Uh, but yeah, he did retweet that that article and said it was a hell of an interview. And yeah,
All right.
that
Well, hey, anything you want to say to the pro GamerGate people reading this book, Brad?
you all go straight to hell.
What about the anti GamerGate people?
You follow them.
They've taken up too much of your life, huh?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Stop. Yeah, but no. For the pro GamerGate people, I would say, uh, you you guys wanted to be heard. If you're still going at it here 10 years later, by all means keep going at it. Uh, and if somebody is not hearing you, make them listen. I mean, don't hold them hostage or anything like that. But you're never wrong for wanting to be heard. I'd say that to anybody.
Yeah, so what you do is you harass women, and
Absolutely
then
right.
they'll listen to you
And minorities.
and minorities.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Obviously, don't do that for the book.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah.
clear, this is a joke. All right.
Yeah.
Anything for the anti GamerGate people though? Any like genuine or people reading it who have a negative view of GamerGate? I should say.
um. Yeah, it's fine. If you have a negative view of Gamergate, that's fine. Make sure you, uh, if you haven't talked to a gamer, I would imagine anyone who's anti Gamergate who is listening to this or reading this has talked to Gamergaters before. I would say give Gamergaters a chance to talk to you. If you're still against it, by all means, be against it. Absolutely. But a whole lot of people uh, who are against Gamergate have never actually talked to a Gamergater to get their side. And I think, what's the harm in doing so?
Yeah. All right, Brad. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nope,
All right. Well,
that's
hey,
it.
thank you so much for doing this.
You
I'm
are?
sorry. I'm sorry. I was a little bit. I did. If I came across a little bit disinterested, like I just got a lot going on, and
No, it's fine. It's fine. I
but
can handle it.
I think you have an interesting story to tell. I really do. That's why I wanted you for the project, even though I was already like turning away other people.
Sure.
Because obviously you did real research on this, and you did like a really good job, actually.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It was interesting.
Yeah. And I'm not getting my break in, by the way, because tomorrow I'm being interviewed about this book by a Twitch
Oh,
streamer. Well, sorry, a Kick streamer, uh, Neve. So she'll be interviewing me about my project.
oh,
And I'm thinking about doing a brief media tour actually as the
yeah.
project's ongoing, and then doing like a an even huge media tour once the book's out, like right before release or right after release.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think you definitely need to plan some breaks in there. Um, yeah, don't get burnt out.
As it turns out, trying to schedule 50 people over the course of like a 3 month window or 2 month window is like insanely difficult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially with me too. I apologize for that too, because for the most part, I don't get a notification on my Twitter when I receive a message.
Oh yeah, you're
So
fine. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and I can be a pain in the ass, and I'll see a message and I won't respond to it, and then I'll forget to come back to it, and yeah,
well, my
I'm a pain.
DMs are like insane lately, so
Yeah,
like I do the same thing to people, and I feel kind of bad, you know. But that's the nature of being a public figure, I guess. Like in
yeah,
so far as I barely am, it's
yeah,
this. You're constantly being bombarded with thousands of people who want to talk to you, or hundreds of people, and you can't reply to everybody.
yep,
Though I
yeah,
try to reply to most people, especially if it's interesting.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I know the feeling.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Brad. I really do appreciate it. Um,
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and raid food shops now. Go say hi to her, everyone, and we'll be closing the stream down.